this out of the way, so it's the beginning of the recording. You're on
Rebirth of the word.
Rebirth of the word. I have been saying, typing rebirth of the world forever. So rebirth of the word. What does that mean to you?
Well, because I was wounded in combat, and I was, from what I understand, I was technically dead for about 30 seconds. So of course I got reborn, right? I died, came back, right? So July 23rd is my alive day. So I said, okay, that's my rebirth, right? And then the word is, because I'm fascinated by mythologies and religion, I know that the word is supposed to be the word, right? Like there's nothing but the word, right? However anybody wants to think of that or understand that, the word is the word, right? God's word is the word.
Yo, Jersey vibes. How are you, Jersey? The legend, the
Everything
myth.
that I'm going to do is going to be reborn.
How are you, Jersey?
Because
How are
I'm
you?
going to
Hope you're
bring
good.
the original text, the actual facts, what's written, not what is
Digging your streams.
how can I say, interpreted by hundreds, but what is understood by a few, I guess, if that makes sense.
This is going to be a great interview. I can already tell.
I am digging
All
your
right.
streams.
And do you make anything? It's mostly
Chilling,
on
that's
X.
cool.
Are you on any other socials that you want to promote, or is it just that one?
I have YouTube, I have Facebook, I have Spotify. It's basically rebirth of the word for all that stuff.
Okay. But X is your biggest one, right? I see you in space all the time. Okay.
Yeah, because I feel like you can connect with people easily.
Only when I'm home,
Yeah,
since,
it's great,
yeah.
great for networking, man. I mean, I met you.
Cool.
There. I met a lot of.
Oh,
people
I get
there.
it.
That's the best
I
thing about it.
understand. I understand what you're saying now.
Okay, so what would you say?
Said it's just
with
like a dark
your
room or
work?
whatever?
Like, how would you describe?
Or when
your
you're not
worth?
home?
Not your worth. Your work. How would you describe your work?
Nah. Well, I like to see it like this. People like to say a lot of stuff, right? And I want to know, where did they get it from? And then a lot of people want you to believe what they believe. So I want to know why you believe what you believe. So that means I have to go to your source, right? If you can't provide me your source, then I can't take you serious. So my work is about
Whole days, leave it on,
understanding why
yeah.
people believe
That not
what they
fun
believe, no
for
matter
them,
who
of course.
it is
I
and what they
understand
are.
what you're saying.
Whatever it is that they believe, I want to understand why you believe it, and I want you to explain it to me, or I want you to explain to me
On puppy problem,
what
aw.
you use or why.
Oh no,
what the
is
feelings
your puppy
is.
okay?
Because everybody's emotional about stuff. You can't break somebody's faith or belief with facts. That's been proven over and over again. You know what I'm saying? So,
Scientifically.
right.
Absolutely
So
has.
my work is about just trying to understand. And if you can tell me and show me, then I understand. If you can't, then like it doesn't make sense to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Anybody who's listened to me for a while is going to know how appealing what you just said is to me. That's fantastic. So, would you call
More folks
yourself
getting
like an
try of the
alternative
week.
history person, or is that not how you
What does that mean?
identify?
Getting
I don't even
try
know,
the week.
man.
Getting by the
Because
week?
everything I find is alternative to what I was taught in school, and some of my favorite people that I follow and still follow to this day, even though I don't agree with them. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of people I don't agree with, but I mean, how am I going to learn something if I don't go and
True.
seek your knowledge and figure out what you know and put
Through
combine it to what I know and see
THROUGH.
what I can come up with both our material, right?
Absolutely.
I can't just refute your stuff. You said that you
understand.
heard me in spaces a lot, and I'm writing a book right now. I'm actually on my last chapter, and part of my research was, how can I give people information, or how can I share the information that's interesting to people that's not repetitive? So I went into the spaces, and I went in there and listened to what people know. I read a lot of books. I actually read a lot of the sources that a lot of people say that they read it from, and they talk about the same thing. So what I like to, I'll give you a perfect example. A lot of people like to talk about the word demon, right? When you look at the word demon, it's always, something evil or ugly or something like that, right?
Okay.
Well, that's not necessarily true when you read Plato's book, Cratylus. I think that's how you say it, Cratylus. And I posted it plenty of time on X, and demon just means somebody that's a wise man or an honorable man that died. according to Socrates, that's written by Plato in his book. So I
Glad
wanted
you're here,
to know
Jonesy.
why
Glad you're here.
it went from wise men from the Greeks, from Plato's perspective at least, for an honorable man that died, to what we know that's something that's what some people consider what we know as evil today. So I was just like, man, okay, if you're going to talk about demons, let's talk about the other part. So I talk about that part and see what people understand from that part. And there's been plenty of people when I shared that out on X where they took a picture of a different book with a different author that trying to explain the same exact thing that I just shared from Plato. And I was like, wow. So I bought that book and got more information. Okay, so demon means knowledge then. So why is it so bad to have knowledge? And why is it considered demonic or demon-like? Makes me think.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, and that's awesome. There's so many things like that where if you actually read the primary sources, which is so rare today, you come out with a different understanding. I've been going through, I don't know if you saw these, but I've been doing, there's this book called, it's called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, and it was shared by Flint Dibble. I don't know how much you kept up with this, but Flint Dibble, yeah, so he was saying that, hey, this book is a racist book, and Graham Hancock has referenced this book. And yeah, so we'll get into that, man. We'll get into that because I think, you know, with you doing this type of stuff, looking into things that certain people find offensive, you're going to have a lot to say about this. So I was like, all right, let's see what's in the book. And so we listened to the book. We've been doing it live. I've done probably about half the book now. It's like a 28-hour audio book. And is it racist? Yeah, it's a little racist. There's definitely some. I mean, it's from 1882, right? There's a little racist stuff in there, but it's also way more complicated than that, and it includes references to things that like he's, you know, Flint Dibble's point is like, oh, this is a white supremacist book. These are Indo-Aryans from Atlantis coming in, and then I read the book, and Ignatius Donnelly, this guy who does say some other racist stuff in the book, which, by the way, doesn't necessarily reflect on Graham Hancock, just because he's citing the book at all, and I assume you agree with that. Right. Or not, if you don't.
I don't know what to agree with, because I don't even know how any of that stuff is racist. Unless I haven't read the book, so.
Right. So, like, I guess what I mean is that, like, do you agree with the theory that if someone cites a book that has racist things in it, but they're citing a part that isn't necessarily racist, that doesn't, like...
Watch your lashes, that's nice.
That's
Nice,
okay
Jonesy, nice.
to do. That doesn't mean that they're racist, I guess.
Well, see, that's the thing.
Can't wait to see them on stream.
Give me an example of what's racist first, because I
Bet
might
they
look
look
at
beautiful.
racism different than what you may look at.
100%.
Sure, they look
You're
beautiful.
totally right.
So we have to have at least agreement on what we consider
On Jersey,
racist
for sure.
first. So let's start right there.
Yeah. So let's do that. And so I've been listening to this book, right? And I've been going through it. So I wish I had saved the specific part that I was talking about, but it said somewhere in the book it said something like they were describing certain races, and this one, like, I couldn't even parse out what they were talking about because some of the verbiage is so different. But they did call a race, I don't know which one, a degenerate race. They also talk about three main races, and I'll get into which one.
It's great, Jonesy. Can't wait to see it.
They're talking about three races of civilized people as opposed to
Love
others.
to see it.
And there was a part about calling, like, specifically sub-Saharan Africans. Gosh, I wish I remembered what the verbiage was, but it was something very negative about specifically sub-Saharan Africans, which I was like, okay, like, that's pretty racist regardless of what your definition is. But in my opinion, right? But I fully agree with you that a lot of times it absolutely does depend on what your definition of racism is, especially today when certain people, like, you know, I'm 29, I graduated college at 26 after the Marine Corps. So, like, when I was in college, people are like, oh, racism is prejudice plus power. It's like this whole new definition. They don't want to hear the term etymology, where I'm telling people, like, okay, racism didn't always mean this. It meant something else, you know, regardless. But But the interesting thing, the most interesting thing about this to me is I saw this in one of Flint Dibble's screenshots. He was like, he was sharing the screenshot to try to associate Graham Hancock with racism. And one of the screenshots is talking about these 3 great civilized people. And one of them is the Chumash. And I was like, oh, what's that? I don't know what that is. And I look it up, and Chumash is like the Ethiopian civilization, Ethiopian, Somalian. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, well, that's not normal racism, right? That's like, he's calling Ethiopians one of the 3 civilized races that he's identifying. So and that's not a way that people think about race today. It's like I talk about this all the time. I hammer in the point that that Africa has a lot more genetic and cultural diversity than Eurasia, than Europe. They just do, because you have someone like a lot of Bantu peoples, and if you go on African Twitter, I don't know if you're around any Africans on Twitter, but you know, I try to get out in all different parts of Twitter, see what people think. They'll kind of deny that Bantu is even a thing, whereas like, you know, in our ways of thinking in the West, we have like, you know, there's archaeological evidence of the Bantu expansion and stuff like that, but that's a Western way of thinking, and I understand if they don't feel that way.
Yeah, Jonesy, I'd love to see your new lashes.
To the Khoisan people down in southern Africa, the indigenous people.
Sure, you look gorgeous
Africa,
as always.
Khoisan, they're very distinct. You go to Ethiopia and Somalia, they're very distinct from Bantu people deriving from West Africa. And they wouldn't consider themselves the same people, and neither would, for example, the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Koreans consider themselves one race of Asians, right? So I look at Ignatius. I'm listening to Ignatius Donnelly's book, and it's a wild book. A lot of biblical stuff in there. Definitely parts I don't agree with, but that doesn't mean I can't listen to it. And I just think I hate the absolute dismissal of what they're saying without evaluating it based on these ideological grounds, regardless of what they are. You know, you do want to know what someone's motivations are, but at the same time, you want to accurately.
I call that the narrative. I call that the narrative. Yeah, what narrative are they trying to present? Because you can find sources from anywhere to create a narrative. You know what I'm saying? Like you can. Anything. Literally, you can find sources for any type of narrative. You just have to might dig deep, and it might be a very small percentage of it, but you'll be able to find something.
Right. And then if somebody wants to push a certain belief, then they can select. They can selectively choose. Like, you know, Flint Dibble presenting Ignatius Donnelly's book as being just overtly white supremacist about this white Atlantis, which is not even what Ignatius Donnelly said. I don't know about you, but I don't think Ethiopians are white, personally. I don't know, maybe Flint Dibble thinks Ethiopians are white, but I don't know how he's justifying that.
Man, look, first of all, I don't understand how anybody talks about how Graham is racist. I followed him for a while, and all he talks about is that there's an older civilization. Now, yeah. I don't think I've ever heard him say they were white. I don't think I've ever heard him say they were black. I don't think I've ever heard him say. All I've heard, maybe him use the word indigenous. Maybe that's probably the club. But you mentioned racism, so I'm actually mixed. My mom's German and Turkish, and my pops is black. Up to about 35 years of my life, I only knew that I was black, German, and Turkish. Then I did a little DNA test from 23andMe and found that I had a lot of other things like ancient Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Japanese, Italian, and so on and so forth.
So that actually is a surprise, but the rest makes sense for
Really?
sure.
Yeah, Japanese is a surprise. Very much a surprise.
That is a surprise. Wow, that's a huge surprise.
Yeah, it is.
Do you have any idea where that came from?
Nah, I don't know. But I'm gonna ask my mom this Christmas to see if she'll do one of those 23andMe and see if she can see it on her side.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, and I did all that when I started my website, rebirthoftheword.com, because that would help me on my journey of religion and the other stuff that I talk about, right? So you mentioned racism, so I'm very familiar with that, right? right? There was a time when I wasn't black enough to hang out with the black people, and there was a time when I, of course, wasn't white enough to hang out with the white people. So of course I know what racism is. And
You could have hung out with my weird white friends. Guarantee it.
I mean, I hung out.
Yeah.
I hung out with so many different people, man, just because of that situation. And I'm not ashamed of it. I know, man. I live in the South. I'm from Georgia, man. I'm very familiar with that. But when you talk about Graham and you talk about all this racism, and then you talk about these groups of people that are, supposed to be better than others and stuff like that happens everywhere. No matter what color, what you look like, no matter what. And I give a perfect example of that. Hotel Rwanda. Okay, we remember that. Hutus and Tutsis. Right?
Absolutely, I do.
Okay. Yeah. Were they not considered people racism by the way they looked on their nose?
Don't stress about food.
A racism attribute to racism. So that right there tells
not a
you
Western conception.
Make sure to eat your dinner.
It's a different conception of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a different thing. Just like slavery. Slavery in America was different than slavery in different places.
The word slave comes from Slav, right? It's not it wasn't a necessarily black thing.
Yeah. Right. And so it's just the systematic of that slavery for that part of that country or continent that makes a group of people better than others, right? So I gave the Hotel Rwanda example because they're both from Africa. They're both on the same part of the land, right? But, just looking at people in a piece of paper saying, hey, well, you're not us, so we don't like you, right? And they did horrible things, right? So
very horrible things.
Racism, I don't understand how people call Graham racism when that is shown throughout the world, no matter what color. And I use Africa for an example because that's an easy example other than what happened in America. Everybody knows about that, but people forget about what happens in Africa. And I'm not trying to put the blame that, this happened in Africa, and that doesn't make it right, and just like it shouldn't make it right in America. But the point is, I don't see personally how people can consider Graham racism when he's looking for an older civilization that seems to be there, okay, no matter who they are. And like I said, I haven't heard him. I've listened to him. If somebody can point it out after this, I love it because it'll make me remember. I have not heard Graham say they were black. I have not heard they say they were white, but I have heard him use the word indigenous a couple of times.
And he's pointed towards, whenever he's done it explicitly, he's pointed towards the Sahara and the Amazon. So the idea that they were white necessarily is weird. It's
like been on, those people that say that haven't been on that side of the world.
Yeah. And there's some white people in the Sahara, and I guess there is some white people in the Amazon now, but I don't follow how they made this conclusion. It's to me, honestly, it feels more like they're just trying to label him with that label, which to me also points to them not having actual evidence against him. It's just an idea of associating him with a not savory idea to discredit him. But that's my perception.
Man, let me tell you. See, this is part of my journey, and going down the rabbit hole is what we do, right? Mm-hmm. So you use the word white, I use the word white. Okay, I'm mixed with white. Obviously, you have white skin, right? Okay.
Yeah, we'll get into more specifics of that likely in a second, but yeah.
I can't look at my parents differently because of the color of their skin because they both made me. So upon me trying to figure out why my mother and my father look differently, just based off of curiosity, I actually had the opportunity and privilege to talk to Dr. Keith Chang. And if I'm not mistaken, because I know a lot of universities, but he works at Penn State University. He is the founder of SLC 2485. I'll say that again, SLC 2485. And SLC 2485 is basically what I would just call it the white gene. It's the gene that causes the Caucasian skin, white skin, right?
Got it.
And
so
he found it. Huh?
Your who created it, is what you're saying. Are you not familiar with that? Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you then. It's it's a Nation of Islam idea that white people were created by
Oh,
equal black
I call them Yoku. Yeah, I call them Yoku. That's what I call them. But yeah, I know who you're talking about. I know the one with the big ass head.
Right, the huge head. Yeah, so often like we
That's funny
joke.
You say that. That's funny you say that.
Often I thank you, Coop, for giving me life.
No, it's funny you say that, and I take notes while we write. And I'm gonna tell you, man, having a Kindle Scribe, bro, when you're doing these interviews is dope, bro. You can write down what you want, racing. You ain't gotta worry about running through paper and stuff like that. So I take notes while I'm talking. So I'm not gonna forget what I say. But talking about Yokub or Yakub or however you want to say it, I actually have books from one of my favorite historians and authors is Godfrey Higgins. He wrote these books since like 1729, published them in 1733. And they're called Anacalypsis Volume 1 and 2 and the Celtic Druids. One of my favorite books, man. Thick books. I have the Kissinger Legacy versions. And he actually mentions Yokub in his book.
I didn't realize it went back that far.
Man,
wow.
And that's why I go live and take every book that I read and everything that I find interesting that I have tabbed up. Like, look, right now I'm doing one on the flat Earth theory.
Okay.
Right here. So I take tabs and I put all these tabs in here and I just take them and I say, man, you know what? I'm just gonna go live and just say, hey, this is what I learned from reading this book. Just basically trying to stay in, the realms of copyright, of course, because I am sharing what I've learned. But hey, this is what I learned. You can't. I mean, it's an educational thing.
Right. Yeah, you're welcome.
But going back to SOC 2485, I had this podcast interview. It's on my YouTube. And he describes exactly what it is, right? How he came to be. And the reason why I wanted to know this podcast, because I want to know where the white gene came from. Everybody says, it's always been either black people here or there's always been white people here or there's always been a mixture of people, whatever. I just wanted to know the basis from somebody who actually has a PhD on it that's doing it. And he found this gene not because he was looking for it. He found it because he was trying to find a cure for skin cancer. And that's how he found it. So he wasn't going out there trying to prove, hey, black people were here or white people. He's actually Chinese, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you said Chang. That sounds Chinese to me.
Yeah.
It could also be Korean, but it's usually Chinese.
Yeah, so he, broke it down for me, Barney style, right? It was like actually one of my third podcasts when I started doing this thing. I was in my garage. What that was doing, I was just setting up. I was like, man, I'm just going to go into podcasts. So I talked to him, and he gave me a lot of insight. Then after I wrote an article on it and posted it on my website. And he actually watched the YouTube video and read the article and gave me more information to put into my article. So it's almost awesome, like what you can call a peer-reviewed article, because it's literally peer-reviewed from somebody from him.
Yeah,
right? So
you could call it that.
Yeah,
they would get mad at you, the academics, but it does literally have peer review.
Yeah, and I have the email from when he gave me, what I needed to do. So and he even commented on my YouTube video. So I don't have nothing to hide, right?
Right.
So technically, I do have a peer-reviewed article out there, but that was interesting to me. But racism is different here in America. It's mostly because of skin color. It's not because of status, I know we was having this discussion. I hope I'm not going off base. But we was having a discussion of the live video of Donald Trump yesterday. Well, a lot of people talk about how Donald Trump is racist. And well, I don't see him racism as skin color. I see him racism as far as him being different from his class. We're not in the same class as him. I'm going to help everybody, of course, because that's what I'm going to do, but I'm definitely going to look out for my people. And as anybody would in that status, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say, and I'm going to give an example of that. We go to the biblical times because our nation is supposed to be a Christian nation, right? That's what everybody talks about, right? When God chose Noah to pick a certain group of people that can only go with him on the boat, and everybody else had to go and drown. Well, we know there had to have been a couple more people than just those on the boat that had to have been righteous enough to be saved, but there were only chosen people because of a situation that called for it, I guess I want to say. So If we're going back to biblical times, and that would be our example of what, somebody picking their people on a class, right? Because Noah was a certain class. God chose him for a reason, for so many different reasons. He was on a higher class than the other people.
And I discuss classism quite a lot on my channel. I was talking to D. Dunking about it recently, and I was like, I don't like racism. I'll say that. Yeah, controversial take. I don't like racism. But like, there's plenty of forms of prejudice, right? There's all of them, and there are certain forms of prejudice and certain iterations of them that are viewed by our own upper classes as ones that are acceptable and ones unacceptable. And like, I view a lot of the stuff that like Clint Dibble does as pretty classist. He attacks people like D. Dunking, who is a tradesperson. He is somebody who is at least third generation PhD. He's entrenched in the upper class, the intelligentsia, the bourgeoisie, if you're a communist, and these are forms of prejudice. And then the different forms, they're put on a hierarchy where classism, in my perception, is viewed as much more acceptable, while racism, the American conception of racism, which wouldn't recognize difference between, for example, Hutus and Tutsis as legitimate. They would be viewed as the same race, even if they don't view themselves as that. But
Right.
sorry, continue.
No, you're right. That's why I brought that up, because you brought up racism, and I knew we was going to talk about that because we had talked in DMs what we were going to talk about, and I prepared myself for that.
Yeah.
And I try to make sure that I can see both sides. Like I said earlier, what did I say? I said I want to know why people believe the stuff that they believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know here in America we have our set of racism. In Europe they have their set of racism, and other countries might follow the Western views, but in reality, it's really all about class.
Right.
And and I don't know why people think that rich people think they're on a high class. Middle class people think they're on a class. Well, tipping, for example, shows that, right? Most, what I'm saying? Middle class don't want to tip somebody because they feel like that everybody should work hard for their money, even though they know that they don't get paid like they do an hourly, right? So there's a class with them. Right there, and there's people disrespecting them because of that. Is it racism? I mean, what is racism? I don't think we ever going to get to the bottom of what true racism is, because it's always going to change. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's going to be different 200 years from now.
And that brings me to, you were bringing up this other stuff. Like, obviously, I'm white in 2024, but my blood's mostly Irish. Mm-hmm. And while today I've seen a lot of academics kind of push back on the idea that the Irish were discriminated against. In the past, that was very true. It was true, and I can prove that. I'm not going to today because that's not the topic, but what that shows is a change in the conception of what racism means over time, as in like what a race is. Because I'm white now. I was born white. My dad grew up in the 50s. But he grew up in a Catholic neighborhood, a segregated to Catholic neighborhood, away from the Protestants, because that's another form of prejudice that we have. This is a Protestant nation, and when you look at the plantation system in the United States, it was actually the style of plantation was based on plantations in Northern Ireland. And a little bit in the rest of Ireland. I don't know if you know this, but in Northern Ireland, that was Protestants with Catholic serfs, with Irish Catholic serfs. And that's just to say that this conception changes over time of what racism is and what races are, and it's not stagnant into any place. You go to the UK, the Poles, the Eastern Europeans are considered a separate race, whereas in America, you're Armenian, you're Polish, you're white. That's fine. You're just white.
Major cities prove that right there.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's interesting you said that, because I do have Irish blood in me, which is funny. I can't believe how much different stuff I have in me, and it's just interesting because I study it all. Yes, the Irish were discriminated. Anybody that knows history knows that. Were they slaves? No, they were servitude. What's the word? What's that word?
Indentured servants.
Yeah,
servants.
indentured servants.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but they were discriminated.
Yo, what's up, elusive brother? How are you, man?
I hope I don't.
Yeah, man. Thanks, brother. Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
But
Thank you.
There were women that were.
Yeah, buddy.
There were women
Luxor.
There were kids that
Ramses' court, maybe.
Because they were Irish. So there was things, but
you know what, brother?
If we can't put the Irish and the slaves of Black American, or not even Americans, but the Africans that came over here on the same level. We know
It's
that.
on
Oh,
that.
yeah, you know.
Doing well, thanks, dude.
I
Thanks.
know you've never done that. I want to make sure that I say that I've never witnessed you to do that, because I know sometimes some people come at your neck. So I'm being official that.
How's it right? Yeah, right.
I've never seen that. So, and I'm glad you said that, because there are people who say that the Irish didn't suffer. Yeah, they did suffer. There's proof of that.
Right.
The level of it is, I mean, can we put any type of level on what's worse than it actually happened, right? And we're not learning from it, right? And we're still allowing it today.
Yeah, I don't know why I did
in
that.
other
I just
countries.
did that. I don't know why.
America
I put the
is
location
thriving
there.
from it.
I really should change it, I
Right.
guess, but
Absolutely,
So-
which
it's
I'm
whatever.
still here. Like Libya. Gaddafi goes down, and now there are millions of. In Libya is a mixed country. They're part Arab and they're part sub-Saharan African. And historically, the Arab slave trade had a lot of black and white people in slavery. But now, like, that had mostly stopped. After Gaddafi, we have
Thank
millions
God,
of black Africans enslaved in Libya and elsewhere. And then there's, conditions in the cobalt mines that all benefit consumerism and American capitalism. And that's, that's just a thing. It's a terrible thing, but it's a thing.
Yeah, and that's why I said so. Racism, we understand that racism can be defined.
Yeah, I know what
by
you mean.
just the continent, country, or location that you're at. And it don't even matter about skin color. We
I know.
just know that
Egypt was pretty
skin
good,
color
but
plays a part of it in certain
I know what
places.
you mean.
And yet some people, and let's put it this way. People say things.
Baron Sambi
to
has no
make somebody
jaws.
Angry all the time. And we know what the key word is for black people to piss them off. So that happens, right? There isn't one for white people as really much. Asian people,
What
not
is this,
really.
man?
But the N-word does hit black people hard. I
Wow,
think
insane.
for me, I'll tell you personally, growing up, I was taught the
I
N-word
might
when
switch
was
to
a
left
kid.
strafe,
I didn't know
honestly.
that till my mom. Of course, my mom was white. My pops was, I think, in the field at the time. So my mom had to explain it to me from a white person's perspective.
Yeah, the basement section.
Right? So I learned it from my mom,
But I mean-
right? And then, but I also grew up with a lot.
Growing up, it
like I
was
said, my
it
dad's
was
white,
confusing
so
because you had to
I
find him. You had to find the Baron. You had to run around.
They say the N-word,
And the only
right?
way to
The
have
other
found
one.
the Baron would either
Nigga,
be
right? So
going
I'd go
through the
around
basement
school,
You
like,
go ahead and say them.
or through that
I'll
crease
go around
door. It's like
saying
that
it,
fake door,
at
right?
school
So
and
like
stuff,
usually
the
most
teachers
people
and
would have
parents-
gone
Some parents, I remember my mom told me
through
that
the
one of
basement
black
to
parents
find the
said that your
Baron.
son called
That's
one
how I
of it,
found him,
and my
if
mom
I
had to
remember right. I
explain
mean,
to her,
I
well,
can't
my son
remember
is
20
actually
years ago,
black.
but
He hang out with his father a lot.
You know?
And so my mom had to actually
what you mean,
defend
though.
me. So not only did she taught me, she had to
especially with the
defend me.
infinite guards
But
on
now think
Double O.
about that for a second.
I don't know if they're
Okay, now,
infinite,
my hair wasn't
but
always this long. I ain't cut my hair in like
Right,
2
trying to
years.
find the
I'm trying to see
Baron.
how long I can get it. But when my hair
Infinite
is
guards.
short, I look more Latino than anything. I don't look back, but the way I dress. Even
I know
today,
what you mean, though.
I have a big ass truck in my front yard, but I have bass in the back and big old mud tire rims. So you
Even
can't-
the megalithic
windows is tinted, so
architecture
you
is
can't
better
tell
in
who's really
Aztec.
in the car until they get out. So you could,
Yeah.
it's some white guy, some country white guy that loves hip hop, or some black dude, and then you're like, hey, it's some Mexican dude, because there's a lot of Mexicans around.
Yeah,
here,
buddy,
too.
yeah, I saw,
and
man. Nice
I'm
dude.
I'm a mixed dude jumping out this big ass truck.
On
But,
Xbox.
Racism, the point
Nice,
is,
man.
like I said, is on the location. Okay? It's not
Contextual. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and it's subjective. It's subjective, and it's going to change. It has changed. I mean, looking at the etymology word of it, has it changed? So,
Yeah.
you know,
Originally, it was used in the context of
amazing.
Native Americans.
I ran out of ammo
and
already. I'm like,
them,
come on.
Not assimilating
Nice,
into
buddy.
white society, like because they valued their race more.
Heck
This
yeah,
goes back
man.
to, like the late 1800s.
yeah, I think
um,
there's some
Are those
documents,
untied world records?
Yeah.
Those must be.
Which is very different, of course. And then it becomes, I think when you look at the word racism, what it looks to mean, I think most obviously is like judging someone by the color of their skin, which now I guess is called more colorism, which is,
Yeah, buddy, I'm subbed to
in-
you on YouTube.
Like I'm sure you're aware, within
I
Black
see the
communities,
updates. I
like,
appreciate them,
this
man.
is, there's like darker skin, lighter skin, all
Okay,
black,
it's
but
this far
within
here.
within a spectrum of it. And then there's, even more
Congrats,
types.
man.
I don't know how familiar you are with
2
this,
more
but
untieds under the
you
belt.
likely are. If you are, let me know. But there is animosity in certain places between African Americans.
I got
When
Egypt
say that, what I mean is,
SA-57 the other day.
those descended from freed American slaves versus more recent African
That's my recent experience with
Western
Egypt.
Caribbean immigrants who in America have much better statistical outcomes on average than what could be called native African American blacks.
Right. So what's so funny is racism. Okay, so by 1928, this is etymology online, right? The etymonline.com. It says by 1928, in common use from 1935, originally in a European context, racial supremacy as a doctrine, the theory that human characteristics and abilities are determined by race. Then it says see racist, and then it says and compare the various senses in race. And then it says, and radicalism applied to American
Final headshot,
social
yeah.
systems from late 1930s. So it's new. 1930s, man. 1928, bro. That's hella freaking new, right?
Sure, I'll blame my 57 time
And
on
it's not
the...
like, what we
on the
define
final
as racism
Baron.
didn't exist prior to that, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is that was when the word comes around.
But
the
not-
word starts to come around.
Yeah, and that's why I said C's racist and stuff like that. But then I go all the way down, and then it talks about basically like in 1882, racialism was basically tribalism, a political system advocating superiority and exclusive rights based on race. Just like we said, 1882,
Yeah.
right? Because now we know that people determine their I guess, and this goes back to civilization, what people consider civilization, right? Because, you don't have to have, a writing system to be considered a civilization. Of course,
you
to
cut
me,
out
like
for a
I said,
second.
it's just that none of it is really, I don't see really anything racism about any of this stuff, man. Like, Graham, he's just looking for an older civilization. And we've explained that in detail, real easy, right? How racism can be applied to everything. So to me, racism, but Flint Dibble, man, I think he's trying to be like his daddy too much instead of being what his daddy wants him probably to be. And what I mean by that is, hey, don't follow what I did. Yeah, learn what I did, but don't follow what I did. Expand on what I did. These are the
What the
questions
fuck
that I
is
asked.
this?
Because his father
Like
probably
what?
did that. I mean, according to him and what little did I know, his father was on trying to figure out different things. That's why he was in the research that he was. He was trying to legitimate find it.
Right.
But it seems like his son, Flint Dibble, is trying to stop where his daddy is because he doesn't want his father. And this is the problem. And this is what we talked about earlier. I might say something that's incorrect. People can go through my YouTube and say, hey, you said this wrong. Okay, hit me up in the comments. Tell me I said this wrong. We'll have a conversation. Hey, I'll comment back and say, hey, I probably did say that. I don't know. I got a brain injury. Sometimes I say things. We're human. People don't understand how much time it goes at putting in these videos and how you can miss things and stuff like that. Then you're fighting ailments like yourself, like TBI and all these other ailments, and you're trying to do things. And then you're doing this, like you got a patron, right? Now, I think monetizing things is great. That's why I'm writing a book, right? And if people want to support you, right, they're going to send you something to help you, be more motivated, right? Like, hey, all this equipment that I have right here right now, I bought all this equipment, right? I'm actually in the middle of a process of turning my garage into a studio so that way I can create documentaries and go all out with this stuff, right? Because after this book, I'm going to go all out. I'm actually like a local historian here too because I go to my local history places around, here in the Americas, and I'm going to start traveling across Europe and all these other places to do videos on and put all this stuff on my YouTube because I feel like our history is not being told by the people that actually want to tell it. It always has to do with money for them. Now, supporting somebody, support him. I recommend, I have a Cash App. I have a Patreon, I think. I don't use the Patreon one. And then I have buy me a coffee, right? Because people say, hey, man, Somebody was saying the other day, you know, and you probably had this so much when you first started. When I first started, people say, hey man, where can I donate, man? I like to donate to you. And you never say nothing around. But when you get it enough times and you get tired of it, you start calling people's bluff. So now you get, okay, you know what, I'm gonna give me a cash app. Okay, I'm gonna buy me a coffee. I'm gonna put it on my website. Okay. Oh, I got one. You can donate right now. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call you, but don't just say it, do it, right? Because don't hype me up. You know what I mean? I'm not here, but I like to share knowledge, and I really feel like Graham is onto something because he wants to know. He's asking questions. He's literally asking questions. What's wrong with asking, hey, is it possible that there was an older civilization, or we can't find metal from that time period? Well, of course, maybe you can't. Because maybe what they had when they found it and they used it and it was recycled. We don't recycle stuff no more. People throw things away so easily today. They have no idea what they're getting rid of.
Yeah. Yeah. And Graham doesn't even he doesn't push the idea of this civilization having metallurgy. Personally, he's cited a source that had it, but the idea of metallurgy is in a larger passage that he's citing where he's talking about something separate, but he's just citing the whole passage. Graham's talked a lot about how different civilizations have different ways of solving
No, that would have been
problems.
so fast.
So,
The
and
left
this is something
strafe.
that is, at least in theory, accepted by modern anthropology, in that a civilization doesn't necessarily need to have metallurgy in order to be a civilization. They don't need to have the wheel in order to be a civilization. The Aztecs, the Mayans, they didn't use the wheel.
Right.
The wheel is used in conjunction with large pack animals. Why would they have it? They didn't have large pack animals. They didn't have large-scale metallurgy. Their weapons are obsidian. That's okay. They were advanced in certain other ways, and they clearly built these large cities. No one's going to argue they're not advanced. But it's a single-track mind, and there's a disconnection between what that is in academic theory of what makes a civilization, of it being this idea of you're playing a game like the game Civilization, where you get the wheel and then you get writing, and it's like on a line, a linear scale. But that's not true for Civilization, man. People, they have different ways of responding to the problems in their environment, and they make different choices and they value different things. It sucks that it's the people who are most, who at least outwardly are most interested in
Come on, no.
being against the ideas.
Oh my God, he's never stuck it on double O, man. Fucking hell.
Seem to me, in my perception, to be pushing that idea the most, and I don't like that.
I just don't understand how people go to racism as far as the color wise. It just doesn't make sense to me, and I see it all the time. So I just don't get it until somebody can say, hey, well, Graham said they were white and not black. Then I'm gonna be like, okay, now I got a problem only because I know about what SLC 2485 is, right? Now I have a problem, right? And now I need him to explain if he doesn't know what it is, right? If he doesn't know what SLC 2485 is, and he learns about it, maybe he'll say, okay, right? And I feel like a lot of people don't take the time to say that they're wrong in a lot of stuff. A lot of people just want to push their narrative, like we said, keep it going, and that way they don't have to worry about looking bad. And and it has to do with money, though. It really does, because imagine you going back saying, and you not saying that you weren't wrong. Just imagine how many people left you when you said you were wrong because they felt like you led them astray. You wouldn't know that, right? Which is, there's a number in that, right? And the problem is that people don't understand is that being wrong in something is the best way to learn, because sometimes in many cases you won't want to repeat the same stupid stuff that you just repeated or believed, right? But it has to be concrete evidence, right?
Okay, quickest break I can possibly do. I really appreciate all the support. All I really ask is that you like and subscribe, and if you'd like to, hit the notification bell to get notified when I go live or post a new video. If you want to support the show monetarily, which is totally not necessary, but I really appreciate it, it's $2 a month on Patreon. That gets you early, unedited episodes. Sometimes they have extra content of 10 minutes, sometimes it's like 45 minutes. There's like 1 or 2 exclusive videos up there. I share my source lists for certain things on there. so you can easily reference them, and that'll be going up to $5, I think, next month. But you'll get grandfathered in at $2. So if you want to monetarily support the show, you can do it there. Or I also offer, and I recommend everyone do this, physical health is really, really important, and I find that it helps me to stay on my workout schedule a lot better, having a personal trainer. So we have Axios Fitness as the sponsor of the podcast. He does online personalized exercise plans for as low as $25 a month after an activation fee and consultation. I think it's really worth it. I'm somebody who has chronic injuries. It's really helped me out quite a bit with chronic pain. It's way better to have a community of guys that are all working towards the same goal. So the link to the Patreon and Axios Fitness are just below. Let's get back to Glimpse Dip.
I know that SLC 2485 is where we get from the dark brown or light brown skin to the white skin. That's according to Dr. Keith Chang, right? Now, why it happened is another story. Now, is it to say that there wasn't light-skinned individuals around? Who knows, right? Because maybe there were, right? We don't know what Neanderthals were. We don't know where what they look like. We just know the skeleton. We don't have any skin configuration on none of these bones. We just know the location that they died at, right?
Right.
I mean,
I think in certain cases there are genetic indicators of skin color, but SLC 2485, I just looked it up. We're talking about 22 to 28,000 years ago. The Neanderthals are extinct, and the earlier I have a bunch of people that are racist on my Twitter feed who talk about this stuff, and a lot of them there's this group called the Western Hunter-Gatherers, which is it's not that far ago. It's not 22,000 years ago. It's a lot more recent, but it's several thousand years ago. There are variations in skin color that come about, even within people that you would call white. There's this idea of Black Irish, right? And that's not just Irish, but other groups of people. But Black Irish is something that people might be more familiar with. These are just people who have more of the Western hunter-gatherer genetics in them, where they have somewhat darker skin. It's not like dark, like Bantu African skin, but it is much darker than like me. Like I have, I'm pretty pale. And that's, haplogroups and everything. So sometimes a Western hunter-gatherer will be shown as being darker, and sometimes they're shown way too dark than most people probably believe, but sometimes when they're shown as being more than tan, this will come up, and then you'll have people looking at it like a racist person looking at it like, this isn't what they looked like. They weren't. These are white people. They're trying to blackwash our history. It's like, well, no. There were darker people in the past, but I digress.
No, but see, this is the thing is that it just gives you a starting point. We don't know what other species look like. We just know what the Homo sapiens look like, us. Mm-hmm. That's what we know what it looks like. And we know, like you said, there's genetic makeups, of course, DNA and other stuff like that, of course, but we don't have, like I said, okay, look, I say this all the time. Just because somebody was buried somewhere doesn't mean that that's where they're from. Okay, I was born in Germany. I'm more than likely going to be buried here in Georgia. Does that mean I was born in Georgia? No. Right. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So migration plays a part, and of course, then you got to take into account plate tectonics and the movement of the continents. Then you got to take into accordance the polar shift and all this other stuff. Is Africa really where Africa was 80,000, 100,000 years ago, 2 million years ago, 50 million years ago? Who knows, right? We just have a model based off of mathematics that humans put into a system to give us the information that we have. Do we have concrete? Can we see it? Did we see it with ourselves? No. So we really don't know. We're giving our best educated guess on the situation. This is everything that I've read. When it comes to mathematics, that's why math confuses me so much, is because math can explain different things. Point example, I'm confused on why people believe 1 + 1 is 3 by Terrence Howard, right? Because I want to understand why they believe that, right? There are people that believe that wholeheartedly, right?
I love Terrence Howard. I love listening to him talk, man. He's
So I want
different kind of thinker, and we need that.
Yeah, and that's
Come
what I'm
on,
saying.
man.
Is he right on what he says? I mean, he does have patents that work. I don't know any of that stuff. I know math from what they taught me in school that 1 + 1 is 2. But I also know there's other dimensions. You know what I'm saying? If I
Right.
get 1 + 1 in this dimension and 1 + 1 in another dimension, what's that's going to make it? You know, if I can get them both, if I can tap into both worlds, you know, this is stuff that I think about is what is it that people are really saying? Because that's why math. I know people who are good at math. Math is easy. I understand it very well. Blah blah blah. Yes, I know you understand. You're good at it. That's why I say I don't understand it because of what I understand from what I see with my eyes sometimes. Right.
Right.
What I feel with my senses. Right. If it doesn't make sense to me, there's nothing wrong with that. That's why I have to educate myself on the subject. But the point is that when it comes to, you know, when the dinosaurs died, the radiocarbon and all this other stuff, it's always the best guess. It's never concrete. That's why I always hear the word aroundabout or around this time or possibly or probably. You got to listen to those keywords. You know, a lot of people listen to the, you know, okay, something goes back possibly 3,000 years. People say, oh yeah, it goes back 3,000. No, it goes back possibly 3,000.
And they used to use luminescence dating, which is a much less accurate form of dating that's still used sometimes, usually in conjunction with radiocarbon. And with radiocarbon,
Fuck
for
off,
many
man.
years, they were like, oh, this is the radiocarbon date. This is how old it is. And then they realized, oh, no, wait a minute. We need to calibrate this. These numbers are off by a certain amount. And so who knows? Like, who knows how accurate they are? Because they used to think bioluminescence dating was good. And then they thought radiocarbon dating was good. And then they're like, no, we got to calibrate. Like, it's...
Didn't they think that Pluto was a planet at one time too?
Right. And then they changed the now it's a micro.
And this
Well,
happened in
it's
our
fine.
time frame. This
Right.
happened in our time frame. You know?
I was
Fuck
reading this
off,
book
man.
from the 60s about
Doesn't matter, it's moot.
about it was about environmentalism and not environmentalism but the environment. And in this book from the 60s they're talking about this theory that the moon, like the earth was molten and the moon, through some weird forces, the moon came out of the earth and like just a big chunk flew off the earth of molten rock and minerals and metal, and then through gravity formed itself into a sphere. And now we know that's completely not true. But I read that in this book from the 60s. It
Sounds like the Enuma Elish to me.
the what?
The Enuma Elish. You said how the moon got hit with something and molten lava and all this other, or molten and all this other stuff came off. Pieces of it came off.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
So the Enuma Elish is basically that's it's a Babylonian mythology myth or Babylonian time frame, and it is basically how the universe came to come be. It's also known as the 7 tablets of creation, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, this is
But there are
cool.
7 tablets.
Yeah, I've never heard of this. Does this
So
because this was a scientific
man.
theory at the time.
So it's basically like a battle between, I guess you want to say planets, celestials, or whatever gods. Some people call them gods and stuff. Marduk and the Nuna and the Anunnaki and stuff like that. It's actually a mythology story, and it talks about how they got into it in parts of the moon and the earth got hit and got involved, and parts of another planet got involved because that's how the astral belt was built, and so on and so forth. There's like details in there that gives you these ideas of what you just said. It's like almost a chaos happening in the universe, and that's why we have what we have now.
Okay.
Basically, like, and I say that because when you read it, you're going to get an interpretation than I am, because I get a different interpretation from what other people get.
Right.
Because because like I said, it's what you know. You're using information based off what you know.
Right. You parse that information through what you already know, your understanding of the world, and that understanding is very different. You know, we have modern humans, modern Homo sapiens, 300,000 years we have evidence of modern
Goes
skeletons.
back to Morocco, Africa. Yeah.
Right. And that's a recent find. It used to be 200,000. 300,000 was
Man, I'm
like
so
last.
glad you said that, because I'm definitely gonna use this part on the clip for something, because man. So all right, Hold on, let me-
And yeah, I can send you this whole thing if you want to give me your email after this. I'll send you the whole thing. You can do whatever you want with it. But this is so common. And then these academics, you know, somewhat of a priest class, an anointed class in certain ways. The idea that all of their information is without question in 2024, when even over the last 100 years, maybe give it one human lifetime of the same information being believed before you start talking with as much confidence as you are, because you know some of that stuff is wrong. A lot of it's probably correct. I don't know which is wrong and which is right, but it's not all of it. It's definitely not all of it.
All right, man. I'm gonna just tell you now because I don't want to start anything with anybody that you're cool with. So, do you know who Bruce Fenton is? I'm that type of person that gives people heads up before I even get into trying to start any drama, because I don't want to start any trouble. But the reason why I brought that up is because you said 300,000 years ago, and we both agree that it's in Morocco, Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bruce has a book called Into Africa Theory. I think that's what it's titled. Like I said before, I always read everybody's material, whether I believe them or not. And he has this idea. He uses the word Afrocentric. Well, I hate that word. Bruce Fenton is not from America, and I hate the word Afrocentric and Eurocentric.
British.
I hate the word Afrocentric more because of the simple fact that people say, well, everybody says that everything's happened in Africa. Now, I hate that statement because most of the Afrocentric, quote, that I say, scholars that I've read from, and I know you know a few of them, they get their information from white guys, right? So they're not sitting here telling people, hey, believe that is Africa. We're telling you that we are now able to educate ourselves, because there was a time in America when black people could not educate themselves, right? And now that we can educate ourselves, right, we share what we've learned, right? Just like anybody, right? Not just black people, but everybody does that, right? We have the right to, we love it, right? Everybody's doing that. That's why you do what you do, and that's why I do what I do, right? There's nothing into that, right? So black people do that, and so they share, you know, and that creates an interest. But that also creates a division between people, because there are people that are racist that will say, oh, that's not true. You know, not everything is African. I give you a point example on that. People were talking about Cleopatra, right? Well, nobody knows what Cleopatra really looks like. We just know that she was Greek, and when we know sometimes we know she's Egyptian. Well, Egyptian people are, guess what? They have brown melanin skin, right? I don't care how you want to look at it. It might not look all like me, but they do have that. They're from Africa. Let's just put it that way, right?
Right.
And
there is that mixture from sub-Saharan Africans as well as from like Mesopotamia and Greek.
And so that's why I said, so we don't really know. And I know some people were bad about the show on Netflix and stuff like that, and that's because they see color. And I mean, I don't think they're trying to change anything. I think they're just trying to say, okay, this somebody whoever did their research, because we don't know who did their research. We haven't talked to them. I think the best thing that we can do is, before we start calling people idiots and stupid, we need to speak to them and ask them why they're an idiot, right? Why the hell do you believe that Cleopatra was possibly mixed? And they can say, well, if you read these certain texts, this is the reason why. And they'll be like, well, all the old movies and this, that, and third showed that she was white. Well, this is not the old time anymore. This is the new times. This is going to be new information. This strikes curiosity. This should strike somebody to read more. Find a text that believes it. And then promote the videos that do it. The problem is that a lot of people that make this big money and have these big followers, you know, the 100,000s and millions of followers and stuff like that, they can say whatever they want to say. And no matter what you bring to the table as a person, if you don't have enough followers, they don't care what you say. And I know that doesn't happen to you quite as often, but that does happen to me sometimes, because nobody knows who the hell I am, right? I'm really a nobody. I'm just a retired
Not
dude.
to me, by the way. Just so we're
appreciate
clear,
that.
not to me, yes.
I appreciate that, man. I just read a lot, and I just share what I've read. And it's been a lot of times where I followed somebody for so many years, and I said, you know what, I want to see what the hell they were talking about. So I'm going to take this time of the year and research everything that they say, get their information, ask them questions, this, that, and third. And there's times when I don't find what they say. Now, just because I don't agree with you, and I'm a harsh person, because I see that they're harsh on people. I literally hear the same thing that they say. They call people stupid in comments, and I know this, I'm better than you, and this and that. And I'm just like, okay, so when somebody knows something that you don't know, or that you're lying on, and they call you out, why do you get so sensitive about it? What's the point? You doing it to others so nobody else can do it to you, so you think your bark is bigger than mine? Well, guess what? I got a bark and a bite. You know what I'm saying?
with you,
So
man.
come on, man.
Like I say it over and over again. Like most of this for me is when talking with academic anthropologists. Those are the people who argue with me the most. And like I tell them I am not above lowering myself to these personal insults if you want to do it, and I'm better than you at it. I am better than you at it.
Man, I'll be sitting over here with my hand like this. I'll be like, man, I hope somebody come in. I said, we can get on StreamYard right now, Zoom right now. I'll go straight to my library. Again, I got a whole bunch of books right here. I just have a lot more on the other side of the house. I'll go straight over there and grab everything. Like, hey, well, this person said this. What do you think? And it'll be like, well, you're gonna have to counter everything that I've learned.
Right.
You're gonna have to counter everything. Give it to you. I'm gonna give you what. I'm not telling you that it's true. I'm not telling you it's fact. I'm not telling you I'm right. I'm telling you this is where I learned it at. And if you're saying that you're a PhD recipient with knowledge in this space, which I've had the luxury of having discussions with people in that field, then that tells me that, okay, there can be two different PhD recipients going to the same exact school, following the same exact teacher, going to the same exact classroom at the same exact time, right? Learning the same exact material, taking the same exact test, can have two different ideas with two different sets of followers. Okay,
Absolutely.
So how do you pick which one is right and which one is wrong? Okay,
right, 100%. Yeah. No, sorry, continue.
No, and that's what gets me. Like I'm telling you, man, when I get started, man, it's so amazing because I feel like we should all have a discussion, right? Everybody, if you feel like you made enough money, when you feel like you got all of this knowledge, then teach the people that you think is below you. Right? There are people that are literally calling out people who want to have these discussions. I see you call out people. I've called out plenty of people. Hey, tell me where the sources are. Let's have this discussion. Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't want to argue. No, okay, so you don't believe in sharing knowledge, because guess what? Arguments are part of sharing knowledge. It's been proven in Greek philosophy since the beginning. Anybody, point example, you talked about metals and stuff like that. Okay, I've read all of Herodotus' books. I don't know how to say it.
I think Herodotus in general is how it's pronounced, but it doesn't. It's fine.
I've heard so many people say so many different things, and I read it and I just say it how I say it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%.
He has how the pyramids were written in his book, Histories, right? And I have all his books on my Kindle. And he actually uses and says that they use levees and pulleys. And not only that you know how people describe how the pyramid there was a ramp that was put up to the pyramids, and they used a ramp to bring on the stones and stuff like that. Well, he actually talks about that in the book. It took 10 years to build it and 20 years for the pyramid. And then he also says that there was iron that was needed to create it, right? That's what he said. Now, this is what's interesting to me. Correct me if I'm wrong, because my brain injury is kicking in. The white limestone, that's what it was, right? The white limestone that went around it.
On the casing, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So to me, that looks more like Greek aesthetics, right? Because if you look at all of Greek history, you look at that's a Greek aesthetic. So, but in that side of the world, if you look at the pyramids, the structure that we have now without the white stuff that's all around it, that's more of that area's aesthetic. The buildings show that and stuff like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? The colors are pretty much the same, right?
Yeah, I think they used marble more. I'm not too familiar with what they use, but that is aesthetically at least does match up a lot more. I don't know how they determined today that it was white limestone casing, but I think that's what they say.
Yeah, I think is I hope I'm not using the wrong word, but whatever made it look white, and that to me looks more Greek. So that could have possibly took 20, 30 years to build, right? Because they didn't have to build the whole structure, because everybody talks about how the pyramids were built in pieces. We know that. But what's the oldest piece of it? And nobody's really ever going to know, because there's always going to be arguments about it. But the point that I bring up about that is that throughout our history, it has been shown that we go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And then PhD recipients will have different ideas how the pyramids were built. And they will use their own, computer simulations and theories and mathematical equations. When I go back to mathematical equations, right? I'm not good at math, so two PhD recipients that's good at math telling me how they came up with their conclusion mathematics, I'm gonna just be like, yo, you're right, and you're right, because I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Now I want you both to get together, have a discussion, and come up with why you guys come up with each other's point. And before you go on to the next argument, fix that first point. Okay, why did you put 1 right here? Okay, I put 1 here because of this, that, and third. The other guy, okay, I put it here. Well, can you agree that this is with this? Yeah, I could agree with that. So you would agree that this is this? Yeah, okay. So we should put 3 then. Okay, yeah, I could agree with 3. And then you move on to the next point. And then you come up with that, and then you move to the next point. You move to the next point. Then you got now both y'all that were arguing with each other at each other's necks. You know what I'm saying? Calling each other stupid in the comments, YouTubes, and this, that, and the third. Now y'all both came up with a conclusion. Now you got facts on the table.
What is this?
Now both you guys got Pulitzer prizes. Both you guys done did something and shared something that the whole world would never forget and never argue it. Because once you guys were at each other's throat, and now you guys understand why. Because you sat at the table and had a discussion. We don't even have to sit at tables right now. We're doing this right over here. That's why I asked you so many times, man, we need to get a round table together with discussions like this.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. And other people have brought that stuff up to me, especially because like I fully agree that when people disagree and they have different knowledge sets and different understandings of the world, that's where you can, you know, try to parse out what's true and what isn't and what the best way to move forward is. But unfortunately, in academia, often it comes down to what incentives are at play, and a lot of, and
ain't no incentives, man. Money and ego.
Right.
Perfect example, because not everybody want money. And you can tell by the people with ego because they say, oh, I'm better than you. You know, I know more than you. I've done this more than you. Yeah, I've read this many books. I've taken this many classes. You know, I went overseas this many times. I actually been there, you know. And the person that's disabled that can never get on that flight can never have the same knowledge as you because they can't travel there. Crazy, bro. Because you're saying you're much on a higher class than that person. And you won't even talk to that person because that person might not even have the funds to even be able to donate to your Patreon. You may not be able to donate to your Cash App, but they've been following you for years since the beginning. And now you're saying you better than them because you've been over these places so many different times and they sitting over there like, man, I can never leave my house. I can never leave my house.
Yeah.
And I read all their books and I read every book that I possibly can on the subject. I've read everything that you've read. I've done the due diligence, but I'm not on the same class as you. I can't contact you. I can't talk to you. I can't even get you to answer my comments.
Yeah.
You know, my disability keeps me from having knowledge that you have because you feel like you're better because you've done something that I couldn't have done.
Yeah, and letters by your name in a lot of cases.
Man, this is weeks, man, I'm telling you.
And you've probably seen me say this to people before. You know, I put out stuff. I put out threads that just have like, okay, this is the published scholarly, whatever. This is what you guys claim to care about. And like, I cite all of these archaeologists, all of these PhDs who have done this work. And very rarely does anyone actually, who disagrees with me, actually look into that information. They want to come at me and talk about what degree they have. They want to talk about like, what college they work for, and I don't care, man. Evaluate the information. That's what I always say. Evaluate the information. If I'm wrong, I want to know. And I've told them time and again, like I probably did get something wrong. I did a lot of research that I published on this. And if you tell me why I'm wrong, we're both better off because I have a better understanding of it and I can share that. But so far, you know, nobody has. And I've challenged plenty of these people to talk to me live. If I'm wrong, talk to me live and explain to me why. And, you know, if I'm really wrong, you could probably make a real fool out of me live. And yet nobody wants to do it for some reason. I wonder why nobody wants to do it.
Man, when we had that discussion between me and you, I said, yo, we gonna quit. I said, we gonna quit. Because we was talking about because you had made a comment, you said that you felt like something about people leaving the country if they, something about the flag. I can't remember exactly what you said.
Yeah, this was a long time ago.
Yeah, that's what got us where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm. It was, I should have pulled that up, but I didn't think we were gonna, I didn't think the conversation was gonna go in the direction that was relevant to, but we can do that another time. I'd love to have that discussion.
Yeah. But when I brought that up, but because that right there started us where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Disagree. And neither of us are offended.
And that's what I'm saying is people's emotions get involved when it's time to learn something. Okay, you've been taught something your whole life, and now you believe something else. Don't you think that if you change from one thing to another, you're just as hardcore that you was before, but just on a different subject, right? Why not be in between them and be like, hey, something, I want to know why it happened this way. You know what I mean? And that's why I said, for me personally, I don't see how any of what Graham is doing is racist. I don't see anything.
Why?
All this racism stuff with Flint Dibble and Graham and all this stuff, it doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't get the chance to ask sometimes these people this stuff because sometimes they get offended and they get emotional about it, and then they, you know, they take whatever it is you say as you're taking a dig at them when they're doing the same thing to somebody else. Like I literally see that all the time. It's crazy to me, man.
And you know, another thing is that, like, personally, I'm not somebody who thinks that the opinion of somebody is more valuable whether that person is a PhD or whether that person comes from a specific race. But I do think it's worth noting that, and there likely is somebody out there, but every single person that I've seen accuse or bring up this accusation that people levy towards Graham Hancock of being associated with racism. Flint is very slimy with his words of like, I never called him a racist, I just said that his ideas lead to eugenics, which is insane. Like, but it's always
he
like
never explains what that means, though. Just like he doesn't explain what civilization means. Like when he was on the Joe Rogan show, I even did a video of it and he blocked me on it too because it was pretty funny.
He blocks everybody, man. I didn't realize you did anything on that, but yeah, it's a big club of people blocked by Flint Dibble.
Yeah, and he says, I think it's like 17 minutes in. It's like within the first 20 minutes of the show. And he talks about, I never use the word civilization, or I never define what a civilization is. I almost never use the word. You know, he almost never defines it, is what he's saying. He never does that. I can't remember exactly the quote that he says, but he doesn't give the criteria for what a civilization is. And the whole argument was older civilizations.
I don't know how I never picked up on this. You're entirely right. I think, if I remember correctly, and I'll confirm this, I think Flint Dibble was talking about, like, it's not used in academic anthropology, which is pretty true. But like,
something like that. Yeah.
If you're not establishing,
or something like that. Yeah.
If you're not establishing the criteria for it, then how are you going to argue that there wasn't one? Oh my God! How have I not picked up? See,
hey, that's how my mind thinks. That's why we started discussing what we did with racism. Because how we gonna argue about something and come to a conclusion on something if we don't even understand what we both are talking about?
Right.
You see it differently than I do.
Exactly.
Now we're arguing about two different points.
Exactly. You have, everybody has like a definition. The definitions change, and like this is I don't like using these overarching terms because of exactly that, because they carry certain connotations to certain people, and it's better to talk about more of the details rather than when you use more of these words that can mean different things. You're going away from understanding, because the more you use it compounds on like how people are talking past each other, and this is so common in the way that
that's what
whenever
I
talk to people that are PhDs usually.
Yeah, it's crazy. You had somebody who was an academic like Flint, and you had somebody who was on, I don't even know what to label Graham. Maybe you can help me out.
Well, he's a journalist by training, right?
Yeah,
and he's never called himself an archaeologist, and he doesn't do digs. He's just not an archaeologist. But to me, they have to identify him as an archaeologist in order to discredit him entirely by calling him a pseudo-archaeologist, even though he's clearly just not an archaeologist.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know what to call him except the journalist, because I think that's what I knew him as by trade or by title. But that's why I say it's just so funny, because they spent that whole time, Flint spent that whole time arguing with Graham. If I was sitting on that table, if I was Graham, I'd have been like, man, so how we gonna argue about something we can't even come up with a civilization? Just tell me that first. Maybe I could start right there. You know what I'm saying? And then he would have to prove what a civilization is, right?
Right. In order to like argue against it. I mean, if you're not going to define the word at all, then what?
The word of arguing about it.
Then what is he not? Then what is the civilization that doesn't exist if civilization doesn't have a definition?
Because it changes. And you pick whatever time frame for your narrative that you want to create, right? He was able to create a narrative based off of his definition or understanding of a civilization that he never presented to the world, right? And Graham has presented his views plenty of times in his work what a civilization is.
Right.
That's why he used the material that he used. And that is why Clint is not looking so good in the ring right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
100%.
Graham just shared what he knew, what he learned, what he understood. And all his questions is that there's an older civilization. But what is considered a civilization? I can tell you what I know from Oxford because they go off of what makes the Sumerians considered the first civilization, right? And that is the writing system, government, and so on and so forth. I did a whole article on it. It's actually my first article on my website. I actually put it in my article from Oxford University and took a screenshot of their website and put a link so that way people can click it and say, hey, this is what Oxford University says. I'm using this for a reason. Why? Because guess what? The Sumerians are studied by Oxford University a lot. They actually have a website from it, right? So when people talk about the Anunnaki/the Anunnaki, I know that I don't have to read Zachariah Sitchin or Billy Carson or Anton Parks. I can go to Oxford University and see myself. I don't even have to read Andrew George or George Smith. But guess what? Okay. Andrew George, George Smith, and Samuel Noah Kramer are used on that website. Billy Carson, Zachariah Sitchin, Anton Parks is not. So now I have, the one side of the story, then I have another side of the story, then I have a whole nother other story. So I can see other stories. Now the thing is how can each of these people prove what they can prove? Well, easy. There's a website called the Cuneiform Digital Library of Initiative, which is where you can actually see the cuneiforms. They also have the British Museum cuneiforms and stuff like that. So if you can actually read, and this stuff happened the way you said it is, and with all this technology that we have right now with screen share and all this other stuff, guess what? I can show you right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's why I always say to me is, if you're a PhD representative, I don't know why I say representative, PhD recipient, and you have sources, and then another person has a different source. I want to see both why you use it, what you mean. That means I want to see everything that you use to come up with your conclusion, right? Because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to dig deep, and see, Graham doesn't have that time. He's out there in the field. He's boots on ground.
Yeah.
But guess what? There are people I'm gonna toot my own horn on it. I read a lot of these books from these PhDs people, and I can tell you a lot of what Graham says is backed up by them. You just have to read the books. Right. They just don't come out and specifically say certain words because they stay away from that, to keep them from having to change what they said later on when they find more material. They're able just to say, yeah, of course there were older civilizations, and they stop there. And they don't talk about how it's possible that they may have had metal, or how they may have possibly had a wheel, because you mentioned the wheel earlier. When I learned about the wheel was that the wheel wasn't created or invented because of transportation. It was created because of pottery, right? And the first pottery wasn't in Mesoamerica or Mesopotamia. It was in Japan. I think it was the Ainu people, A-I-N-U, if I'm not mistaken.
A-I-N-U. Yeah, they're the indigenous people of Japan.
Yeah,
They're not fully related to the current Japanese people.
Yeah. I believe they had the first types of pottery, if I'm not mistaken. And
I spoke incorrectly on this a while ago, so I have to go back and look. But that's interesting.
What's that?
I had misidentified something, and someone pointed this out to me, and I realized I was speaking incorrectly, but I haven't gone back and confirmed what I had gotten wrong. Because I had originally thought that the wheel came about in conjunction with the domestication of a horse, but I think I had gotten a detail wrong.
Come on, man.
but it's something around that. And I think pottery comes before, but regardless.
Oh,
sorry.
okay. The oldest pottery is in Japan. Or China, I'm sorry. It goes back 20,000.
Oh, China.
Yeah, 20,000 to 19,000. The Jomon, that's the one that I was thinking about. Was the pottery from, Jomon.
Jomon.
Yeah, that's from 14,500 to 300 BC.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one that I was thinking about, yeah.
Not Japan. Germany.
Well, it's Jomon, Japan. It's in,
okay.
It's not the AINU people. It's not them.
Okay.
They call well, I don't know.
Well, they might be part. Yeah, the Jomon people. I've never heard of them.
Yeah,
but very
that's
cool.
Yeah, that's who I learned. The oldest pottery was from China, but the one when I was saying Japan was from Jomon.
Okay.
But what I learned is, and this is why I brought this up, because this is why I always like to have my notes and stuff next to me. When you read mythology from China and Japan, they're almost identical. I literally have books on them where they say that they're literally almost identical. The names just change and the stories may just vary just a little bit, but they're
very similar to like Greek versus Roman or Mayan versus Aztec. I think I'm not as familiar, but that sounds like what it would be. I think they have a common root. Wait.
I did read something because like I said, I have my notes right here. I did read something because I knew we was going to talk about pottery because of civilization, right? A lot of people, Samuel Noah Kramer says that, in one of his books about pottery and how it's related to the Sumerians and stuff, so on and so forth. But what I learned is that the Czech Republic recently just found possibly some pottery that goes back 28,000 BC. So, I didn't write the source. Here, let me type it in my phone. I can type it in my phone real quick. Oh shoot. I didn't write the source for some reason. Here's what's from. Okay, here's something from Wikipedia. I know a lot of people don't use that, but let me go to the references.
Good starting point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I go straight to the references.
Yo, Cloud9, what up, brother? How are you, man?
A lot of references that
Good
say
to see you,
that.
man. Hope you're good.
But the
Hope
reason
you're
why
doing
I
well,
brought
man.
up pottery is because pottery is
Appreciate
really
that.
basically just dried up mud, really, right? Clay or whatever, right?
Yeah,
So,
fired dried up blood, but yeah.
And that was before they started using fire, right? Because, sometimes they just, made a quick one and it crumbled real quick, or they used different things. But the point is that with civilization, we use civilization differently than other people, right? Just like we use racism differently than other people. But the point is the older civilization, we won't know until we get a.
Oh, good,
basis
nice,
of what
buddy.
we all
Thanks, man.
consider
Glad
what
you're good. Glad you're doing well, man.
Right. We can't have that discussion until we both understand and everybody says, hey, okay, this is what a civilization. And one of my favorite anthropologists, I believe she was an anthropologist, if I'm not mistaken, like I said, with brain injury, Margaret Mead. She did a lecture, and there's no written records of it, no recordings of it, but there are people said that she said it in her lecture, at one of her lectures that she had, or speakings that she had.
I'm good, man. I'm doing well.
They
How
said
are you?
that She
Hope
said
you're doing
that,
all right.
she believes the civilization started when the first femur was healed, and that goes back, I think it was 15,000 years ago. So she gets her
because
different.
it's about, caring for other people.
Exactly right.
And if you go back to the Neanderthals, though, there's evidence that they were caring for each other
exactly.
way back then. Yeah.
Now we go further back than that. Now we're Neanderthals, of civilization before Homo sapien. Right. The problem is that we're looking at technology now as a way of saying, hey, we're this smart because of this. I can tell you right now, in the 90s, man, I think we're more modern than we were in the 90s, right? Because the 90s was a modern time for us. Then when the 2000s hit, that was a modern time for us. And then 2020s is a modern time. And it's going to go on and go on. We're not going to have the same technology. And are we really better off with all this technology that we have right now? Who knows, right? A lot of people say we were more connected with the earth and other elements on the outside of us. I mean, there are people trying to practice meditation and astral projection and do all this other stuff. If you can actually live what you see on TV and come back to life and live a video game as entertainment and you only have to eat when you need to, then wouldn't that not be entertainment? Right?
Not to me.
That would be entertaining for you?
Well, I mean, I would prefer to, you know, I like real stuff, right? I don't want to live my entire life in a video game like that movie Surrogates, I think.
And I'm glad you answered the way you answered it. I was reading this. I was reading this article, and it was about fathers and their sons, right? And I actually seen a video on TikTok, and it was about this father. He had his son was in a wheelchair, and I don't know exactly what he was trying to do, but his son fell, and I think he was trying to move or something like that. He picked up his son, right, and he put him in a chair, and the son started crying. You know, the father was broken, and the title was something like. The father probably cries more at night than the son does because, you know, it's breaking his heart and stuff like that.
Yo, Stash, talking video games.
Because it hits me because I have a son. My son has autism, and I think about the troubles and problems that he's going to have in the future. But what's amazing to me is that my son also can read. He reads really well at 5 years old. My daughter is great at math, so I feel like my son has savant syndrome. But he doesn't need any real help. He's just speech delayed. And he just has to be reminded. But like I said, I talk about it a lot because this is what helps me on my journey. Knowing about how did we create the things that we created, right? Because in the past, we didn't nurture.
What's up, Stash? Yo, what's going on? How are you guys? How are you guys? Hope you're doing well.
300.
Just pretty frustrated with this game, guys. Sorry. Just so like focused.
They have a story about a disfigured dude out there that couldn't serve in the army.
I might take a break right now. I don't know.
You know, he like everybody else, and there's stories about, you know, an individual nurturing kids and killing all babies and stuff like that. And we don't know what that means. So it made me wonder, you know, about, oh man, this is a real deep story. Now, this is where it gets interesting to me is that, you know, when his son was crying and he was, you know, putting him back in there, it made me wonder, why did we start sacrificing the people we did and why we don't sacrifice people now? And is there a certain reason we gained more knowledge, right? And the reason why I ask you, do you think astral projection and all that other stuff is, would that be entertaining, is because that is, from what I understand, astral projection and what I try to practice is that it's almost exploring outside your body and doing other things, right? And many people talk about it and all this other stuff. Everybody has their own lucid dreaming effects and all this other stuff, daydreaming effects and dreaming effects and all that other stuff. But it goes back to history of us doing things that we can do. Now, we talked about, you know, the individuals where, what can I say? We're always about being stuck on what they believe, right? Like, you can't change their minds, right? Now, when we think about the myths and the religion and all this other stuff that we have, we know that myth and religion is playing a lot of part in what we do today, right? Because they say if we don't learn our past, we're going to repeat it, right? That doesn't take away the fact that things are going to happen the way they are, no matter what it is. But what I try to understand is, like I said, why people believe what they believe. And this whole discussion was really about, Graham Hancock and the older civilization. Every civilization has their own criteria, and that's basically what I was trying to say. And we can't judge a civilization based off the criteria of today, because the circumstances may not allow that, right?
Yes, and they have their own values and their own incentive structures based on their individual human and physical environment.
Yep, and it goes back to class. It goes back to class.
Yes, and often, like, we talk about class, but a lot of times, what starts as class then becomes associated with other factors over time. Like, when we're talking about racism and classism, you have, like, it's not like slavery in the Western Hemisphere starts because of a pre-existing notion of sub-Saharan Africans being inferior. That comes later. Like when they're first enslaving, it's a lot of Native Americans they're enslaving initially, and then that doesn't work very well. So the incentive structure is like, okay, there's these existing slave kingdoms, there's this existing Arab slave trade. Let's go down there. And originally in the 1500s, 1600s, started by the Portuguese, this slave trade. Some of it was literally capturing slaves themselves, which they then realized this isn't as good of a way of doing it. There's these existing kingdoms that do this, so we'll go and buy slaves from these existing kingdoms, and then those kingdoms expand in order to meet the demand and all things, and then eventually the Native Americans are dying from disease, and they can run back to their home, they can get away easily, so like it's just more efficient. It's terrible to think about it in that way because we're talking about human beings that are being enslaved in this. But, you know, it from an economic perspective, from what the incentive structure is, it makes more sense to buy people from the Gold Coast of Africa. And then downwind of that, then comes an association with people that look a different way. What originally starts out as essentially classism in a very, very distinct way. It's a very literal class in the sense that these people that are like this are a member of this class. Racism is downwind of classism in a lot of ways. You get what I'm saying?
No. I get it totally. Let me go back to what you were saying about buying slaves and all that. I did my research on that too. One thing that I learned was, and I don't know which came first, really, but the slaves that were traded most of the time, or in the beginning at least, were individuals that were criminals. It wasn't just, good people, right? Like, hey, we're going to get rid of these criminals. Almost like how I'm not trying to start a conspiracy theory or argument or anything, but like almost how like they're saying that our country is being invaded by certain criminals that are coming over the border because the countries wants to get rid of the criminals, right?
Right. And there are certain actual real examples of that, like Cuba back in the day.
Exactly.
I don't know how much of that is happening right now, but there is historical precedent of that. That's pretty,
And that's why I brought that up, and that's what I'm saying is that and back then they was just getting rid of them. So hey, because I know in African culture, and I've read many African books on culture books on this, is even though they had slaves, they still had to treat them right, meaning that they still had to feed them. They still had to give them clothing, shelter, so on and so forth. They had to take care of them. You could actually get in trouble for beating a slave and all this other stuff. They were a slave. They had to work for you. They had to pay their debt. They had to do what you told them, but you also had to treat them right, like a human, right?
And there is historical precedent for that in the Roman era of slaves having certain rights, less rights, right? Less rights, but certain rights. And that's actually, there is precedent for that, not in, I mean, there's a little bit, I think I know much less about the South than I do the North, but Connecticut had slaves back in the day. They ended
it started up there.
Right. It at a much lower scale, but it did start up there. And then there's also the triangle trade, which is like a huge, like, there were people making a lot of money off of it, even though they weren't importing slaves en masse. There were laws in colonial New England concerning how slaves were treated.
You're right. It's funny you say that because, like I said, they were getting out if somebody that no longer respected you, right? Because there is going to be tension between a slave and a person, right? One is going to be higher than another one. Goes back to class, and we were just talking about that, right?
Yeah.
So one is always going to have resentment, or eventually somebody's going to have resentment, no matter what, because the slave may not get all the good stuff that the owner may get, right? And the kids and so on and so forth. So like I said, there's going to be resentment. So just think about it. Well, this person's pissing me off, but I still have to feed them every day. I still have to do this because I would be in trouble by the tribe and this, that, there. Somebody comes along and say, hey, we'll give you money for this person because we heard that you don't like them. You made it known. We'll pay you for this. And they put them on a slave ship. I'm not trying to condone anything. I'm just telling you possibilities of what I've read. Literally, that's happened. I mean, they have evidence of that.
Yeah, and I believe that completely.
No, they actually do. I've actually read this from African scholars that it wasn't always that. First of all, the slaves were treated with respect, and they had to treat them. But just let's just use common sense here. There's a class level on that. When you consider somebody a slave, no matter what they are, you consider them higher than they are, no matter what, right? You consider yourself better than them, no matter what, right? That person's going to feel resentment sooner enough later, right? So it's only going to come natural that you're going to get into tensions, but you're still going to have to do right by them regardless, because nobody else wants them. Nobody in the community wants them. You're complaining about them. Why anybody else wants to take them, right?
And yes.
So
And that's what people miss is there's two sides of it. It's almost Confucian in a certain way. Like there's the responsibility of one side and the other.
No, it's just that people.
A certain way, right?
It's just that people think that when you say stuff like this, you're going against the narrative. No, I'm not going against the narrative. I'm educating you on something. This is what possibly happened. Okay, I'm not saying any of that stuff is wrong, right? I'm just telling you what happened,
man.
what I've read from African scholars. That's why I hate the word Afrocentric, because I don't think a lot of people actually read the African scholars, because they only use the same information that they were taught from, white scholars. And like I said, most of them quote Godfrey Higgins. That's why I go back. I went back and read his book, because this dude spent 6 to 10 hours a day in the 1700s reading and researching. Like, he was supposed to write more books, but he died mysteriously, right? So, but his information is amazing, and it still holds up today. I mean, even with haplogroups and genetics and stuff like that, that's how I found everything that I learned today was because of that journey. Because everybody was saying this and that. Like I said, I want to know what the white scholars say. I want to know what the racist people say on both sides. There are racist people on the black side that I've read books from. I'm just like, man, I can definitely tell this person racist. Just the words that they use. And they'll say, I'm not racist. Then they'll say stuff like, black people. I'll be like, look, it depends on what you consider. First of all, what is racist, right? Is there a systematical racism? Yes. Is there a race type racism? Yeah. Is there skin type? Yeah. I mean, Koreans, there's a racism between each other, and there's both sets of Koreans. So come on. I mean, what are we going to use for your term? And what is going to be your vocabulary and understanding of it? Because we can argue all day. I'm not here to argue. I'm just going to be like, okay, yeah, you're right.
And especially with Koreans, they're the same people. I mean, they look different. But that's because of nutrition, right? Like they're the exact same.
Yeah, you
people.
can tell. Yeah, you can tell. You can tell.
Yeah.
And they look at each other with hate. You know what I mean? There are scumbags. They're just that. I mean, they use the same type of stuff that we have in language. I mean, it might not be as derogatory, but that's only derogatory because we understand it in our language. Somebody say something derogatory in another language, we're like, man, it don't sound right.
yeah, 100%, man. Okay, so we've been at this for an hour and 40 minutes. I think we should wrap this up. But what I want to hear, I guess, is...
I hope I didn't disappoint, man.
No, of course not, dude. Of course not. No, this is great. You're my type of guy, seriously. And this is the type of stuff that people come to me for, I think, in a lot of ways. I think both of us, in a lot of ways, are and correct me if I'm wrong here in identifying you, but very abstract and very, we digress quite a bit, which is okay. It's not great for a college classroom, I guess, but that's probably why neither of us is in a college classroom.
Yeah, I ain't got a college degree, bro. I ain't even gonna lie to you. I got
that's okay.
certificates from Harvard and stuff like that, but I ain't got college.
I've got 3 bachelor's degrees, and I don't think I need them to talk. Nobody needs a college degree to talk about information, and you're completely able to evaluate information even if you don't have a college degree. I hate this idea that you can't. It's ridiculous.
I tell you this, man. I meant to tell you this earlier. So I love religion. So you mentioned certificates and college degrees and stuff like that. So I do have certificates. So when I took classes from Harvard, and got some certificates. Took classes from so many different classes. I don't know if you know about edx.org. But
I've heard of it,
I take a lot of my free classes from there, and what I learned is that you can pay for the class and you get a certificate to say you took it, but the material is still the same material, so I stopped paying for it. I was like, I don't need no more certificates, so I got enough credentials. And then when I talk a lot about religion, I actually got my credential, my ministry credential, so I'm actually a minister, so I can open a marry some people and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I got these credentials because that's what people look for. I mean, it's not a college degree, but it's to say, hey, look, and I'll tell everybody, man, I hated college, man. That's why I joined the military in the first place. I did not want to go to college. My best bet was the military. And I did want, and what happened at 9/11 kind of fucked up with me. So I was like, yeah, that's just a, incentive to go more. You know what I'm saying? I ain't got nothing else to do. You know what I'm saying? No fit. I'm not going to college. I'll just go there. So I went to Iraq. Been to Iraq both 2 times, Afghanistan 2 times. Got wounded in Afghanistan my last combat tour. So I was just like, you know what? I'll just stick with this. Now I'm thinking about actually going to college because my wife keeps saying you should go to college and get a degree or finish your degree. So I'm thinking about probably going back just to get my theology degree since I talk a lot about mythology and religion and stuff.
Well, I don't know how far out of the military you are, but and I assume there's the GI Bill. There's also like the voc rehab, which has different rules to it, and I think Donald Trump, I look this up because correct me if I'm wrong. You can call the VA; they'll give you this information if you can get through to them. But you might still have access to your GI Bill if you haven't used it.
No, I still have it. I still need
Yeah.
it.
It used to expire after a certain amount of time, and I think that Donald Trump changed that rule. Regardless of how you feel about him, that was a good thing. Because people would be out of the military.
I was happy when he did. I was happy when he did the hemp farmers bill in 2018, which made THCA legal.
Oh, yeah.
It just crazy what people think. Like, I love to have more conversations, bro, and I really think that you should bring a round table to the people because there are definitely people.
Well, my university, yeah, really.
And those are probably the best ones to talk to because they're
Well
the ones
said.
that gives you fire to what you need back. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think I'd like to do so let's talk about that as the closing topic, right? So, what does a round table for this type of stuff look like? It's obviously the goal, at least one of the goals would be to, different people have different information. One of the things I love about my comment section is that I got people from all over the world, all different backgrounds in there, sharing what they know. So I'm in there, and there's a regular that's from Turkey, actually. Well, he's British born, but he's Turkish, and he brings in stuff like I'm talking about a certain thing, and he brings in the Quran or the Hadiths because he's not anymore, but he was a Muslim. He grew up Muslim, and so he's bringing in his certain way of thinking. And then I got another guy that's from Scandinavia, and he brings in stuff that he knows about from Scandinavia.
Like Norse mythology and stuff.
Right. Whenever that's referenced. We had a thing the other day where somebody was bringing in some. I evaluate information as it comes in, but somebody was saying some weird stuff about Norse mythology coming from. They were making connections between Islam and Norse mythology, which just.
Oh, with the ring probably. With the ring.
Oh, I see. I don't even know, but I'm looking at this. Oh, the ring, the literal ring.
Yeah.
That they had. Yeah, I've seen that. I've actually posted about that before. But that didn't make any sense to me based on the time scale. Islam doesn't come about till 700 AD. But regardless, we have a lot of different people with different information. And to me, that's a good thing. And people don't have to be offended by information that doesn't align with their preconceived notions. And I would love to have something like that. It's just I don't know what the best way to do it is. So
I've been thinking about this for a long time because this is what I wanted to do. So just like you said, you had different people for different things. So you have a topic, you know how you get on your live videos, right? And you say, hey, I'm going to talk about this. You pick some things that's in the comments that strikes your interest, right? And you say, okay, I want to talk about this. Okay, so you say you had a guy from Turkey, right? That's British, right? Gobekli Tepe is a hot topic right now, right? So we can bring him in, and you got somebody around the world that's probably an engineer that you respect, that they present their work to you, not just commenting but saying, hey, you should check this out and look at this, or make it easy for you. Somebody that you've seen comment a lot. You know who those people are, right?
Yeah.
you have those people talking there, and you basically talk about, okay, so say like somebody says something about Gobekli Tepe and they said the calendars, right? So you have a calendar expert, you have somebody that's an astrology expert,
I do have some
engineer,
astrology expert.
yeah, engineer. And you just strike up a conversation, like a late night conversation. And you bored, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. You don't sleep. You got a brain injury. You know how that is. Hey man,
Yeah.
you know, just hey, I want to get on at this time. Hey bro, hey, y'all gonna be ready about this time? I don't think I'm gonna sleep tonight. Cause I know there's nights when you're like, hey, I'm not gonna sleep tonight. I know I'm not gonna sleep tonight. I know for a fact I'm not gonna sleep tonight. What am I gonna do? You know what I'm saying? It's 2 o'clock. Let's talk about this. You get on StreamYard and you just have a conversation. And that's it. 2 hours is about what you do, like what we do now, and that's it. That's all. 2 hours is about the point where most people stop talking anyway.
Yeah, I think we should just run with it, man, and just do one and pick a topic and set it up, and then the best way to learn is by doing, which is something PhDs don't understand. You got to learn by doing. So I think there would be a lot to learn just by trying this out and seeing how it works the first time, and then moving out from there. But I would love to do that, and that would be something that I could do. A lot of the stuff I produce, I have to do a lot of research beforehand. Got to do a lot of prep, a lot of editing, lots of stuff like that. And this is something I could do where I could rely a lot on what other people know. So yeah, let's set one up. Let's set one up.
Just let me know, man. I'm always joining your lives, man. They be funny sometimes, man. I just started listening to comments, because I didn't want to just jump in there. Because I'm not going to lie to you, bro. This Twitter and all this other stuff, I'm using it right now mostly to promote my book, because I am writing a book. So I do it to promote my book. And that's why I share what I share, and that's why I have all these discussions, because I think it's important to share this stuff. I mean, I don't have nothing else to do. My kids are at school during the day. I'm up all the time. I'm up at night. I take 2 hours out the day just to do this stuff. That's why I do what I do. And eventually one day I'll have somebody say, hey man, I take you serious. I want to know more. And just we keep going and going and going.
So that's a good last topic. Let's talk about that too. What is your book about?
It's gonna so basically the origins of a lot of different topics that I talked about, and I give you an example like the Big Bang Theory. I give you a good example, and I don't mind sharing it because I talk about it all the time. When people talk about the Big Bang Theory, they talk about it in a negative way, right? Like it didn't never happen. You either have an idea that something started from nothing or something started from something. That's the only two other theories, right? But I want people to understand where that came from, why you believe whose side you're picking. Remember when I said you can have two people with PhDs with two different classes and so on and so forth and have two different ideas. And even though these people never had this to fit this criteria, they both follow they gave their idea of how the universe came to be. So Georgi Lamate was a guy that came up with the primeval atom, which is basically the Big Bang Theory. It started from, some kind of explosion, right? But he never used the word Big Bang. His critic, Fred Hoyle, got on BBC radio around 1949, 1950, and used the word Big Bang to make Georgi Lamate look like an idiot, basically. Just saying, he's wrong, he calls it the Big Bang Theory, something like that. Or, hey, I never listened to the show or nothing like that, of course. But Fred Hoyle is where we get the term Big Bang from, right? And he believed that I'd rather people read about what Fred Hoyle believed, because the terminology and stuff that he uses is confusing, and I don't want to mess it up. But Georgi Lamate came up with his idea, and then he was critiqued by Fred Hoyle, and Fred Hoyle is that. So that's like basically what I talk about. And I talk about the Enuma Elish, which I was telling you about, because that's a creation story. That's probably the most detailed creation story out there that I know of personally. I mean, there's others like the Epic of Gilgamesh and so on and so forth, but this one is like a creation story. I also talk about what makes us human, right? Because there's always arguments about human. We talked about that in here, right? I had a great discussion with Michael Cremo, author of Forbidden Archaeology. Co-wrote a book with Richard L. Thompson, I believe. I did a podcast with him and asked him what his ideas of anatomic reviewing, right? Same thing with Bruce Fenton, his idea from reading his book. So I know what I talk about humans. I talk about the different gods, the mythologies. And then basically my last chapter is going to be a revised of all my articles, or most of my articles on my website that I feel like people need to know. I'm actually going to put on there the peer-reviewed article that I got on stuff like that. You know, my book is basically, okay, you want to know why people saying what they're saying and where they're getting their information from? This is the book to find it. And these are the subjects that I'm talking about.
So, is it fair to say that it is about the origin of humans or
Come on,
civilization?
man.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I would
If
say
that's
that.
wrong, please
No,
tell me.
no, that is because that's one of the chapters is a civilization, what makes a civilization. And I explain that. It's like the origins of it. What is the origins of civilization? Because it all starts in the civilization. We don't talk about stuff that happened before we was in writing systems. We don't talk about hunters and gatherers and how they survived that many years, that many million years doing the bare minimum that we do now. I mean, hell, people can't even do that today. Right?
Not a lot of people do. I talk about that stuff, but most people don't. Yeah.
So look, it's a place to go to, and of course I'll be posting the chapters on when I launch it, so people can see. Okay, this is what he's going to talk about. These are the subjects that I'm interested in. Okay, yeah, I want to know more about this because I can't seem to find the right answer, and I really dig deep in this stuff. And I'll be honest with you, and I'll be the first person to tell you. I tell people this all the time. You know, people would say, you know, don't use ChatGPT and stuff like that. I know people are going to take my book and going to go to ChatGPT and type in the sentence and see what it says. So what I made sure that I did is you have to pay attention to the words that I said, because ChatGPT, because next year what I'm going to start doing is a me versus ChatGPT thing, meaning that I'm going to go through my books and saying, this is what this book says. Why are you saying this is wrong, ChatGPT? Because they're not having the same material. I did that with the demon thing that I talked about. So I know people are going to take my book and they're going to try to be lazy and say, oh, well, ChatGPT says you're wrong. I said, well, and that's when I said, you can comment and talk to me directly, and I will get an Australia and explain it to you. If you don't understand it in that book, you have to read the whole book to understand it. Because it's not going to be, it's going to, okay, so I give you an example. When I talked about, the kind of idea where people get flat earth from, when I showed you the book with the flat earth, how there's sources used that there's evidence out there that says that earth is flat. There's literally evidence out there that says that, right? And so what I do is, okay, why do people believe the earth is flat? Well, people say, well, the Babylonians, the Greeks, people said that. Well, I'm giving you the names of the people that actually came up with those theories. So you know where their information came from. Like Almagest, like from Ptolemy, the Almagest book. Man, that's one of the hardest books I've ever read, bro. It's a thick book with nothing but mathematical equations. And you know, people always are talking about what are these phenomenal things happening in the sky, and you know, the moon and all this crazy stuff that's happening. Man, that's all that book is about, stuff like that. And they've been recording it for thousands and thousands and thousands of years trying to perfect it. You know, they made a mistake 10,000 years ago, but 20,000 years down the line, they fixed it and they annotate that. And it's crazy.
Wow.
So that's why,
I haven't read that.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. A lot of my information comes from actually books. You know what I'm saying? I don't watch too many YouTube channels. I do support people's YouTube channels, of course, like yours. I do watch your YouTube channel. And I knew you had a podcast and stuff like that when you mentioned that in your X account. I know all this stuff because I do my due diligence behind the person that is saying what they're saying. Because I might not agree with them, but of course we're gonna read different things. You can read a book and I can read a book, and we'll have different interpretations of it. So we'll have a basic understanding of it, but we'll have different interpretations of it.
Like this,
And that's
come
why I
on,
said
man.
most of my information comes from these books, comes from articles, magazines.
Holy
It comes from
fuck me,
esoteric
man.
and exoteric Gnosticism. I mean, it comes from everywhere, and I show it. I mean, literally, I'm sure you went through my Twitter account. You go through my Twitter account, X account. You see that all I do is take pictures of what I've read and I quote what book I read it from. So that way it's not me saying it. And that's probably why I don't ever have anybody come at my throat. And I really wish I did. I wish people would come at me like, you're wrong. And I'm like, yeah, let's get in the ring because I'm ready.
Yeah, it's fun sometimes. It can be a little much when you're doing something that gets you a little bit too much attention, but yeah, it's fun to do it a little bit, man. And again, you know it. You're a vet too. There's no chance that a PhD can stand up to me on talking. I am way better at talking than you. You spineless, invertebrate, coward little bitch, Flint Dibble. Sorry, you know, not you.
No, I'm glad you said that because I can't say it to him because he blocked me.
yeah, well, he has me blocked too, of course. He doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't want to have that discussion. And Flint Dibble, you're welcome. Come on anytime, man. You can come on. We'll do it live.
You got to define what a civilization is first.
Yeah, you do. You have to. If you're going to disprove something, you got to at least define what it means, right? Yeah, absolutely. So Twitter, you're on Twitter. I'm going to have that link down below.
Man,
so people
like,
can go find you.
please.
And yeah, we'll talk again, man. We have at least from my perception, we have there's some overlap in the ways that we think. And I think that, you know, since I have an audience that appreciates the way that I think and the way that I talk about certain things, I think they're going to appreciate the way that you talk about things as well. And that's what I love doing. I love having conversations with people who I can who, you know, when you're it's okay. It's fruitful to have conversations with people that you disagree with and you don't have as much of an understanding. But when I talk to people like you, or Amanda, who I spoke to last week, I just released that episode on Machiavelli. It's much easier to you can understand each other. There's not as much ground between that you have to cover to make your point. You can kind of get each other, right? But yeah, thank you so much for coming, man, and we'll talk soon. There will be more.
All right, man. Thanks, bro. I appreciate the opportunity, man. I really do, bro.
Thanks.
Because it's hard promoting this out there, man. Especially when people keep coming at your neck. You're like, man, all I'm trying to do is just share what I learned, bro. Damn, calm down.
Yeah. And people are somehow so angry about it. It's crazy. All right. Well,
only on the internet. They won't never do that, you know, face to face. That's something.
That's what I tell them, man. That's what I say all the time. I'm like, look, you would not talk to me like that in real life. You just wouldn't. And it's not even just that they'd be like scared of me or something. Number one, like they might be. But more importantly, what I'm really referring to there is that like there's a different psychological thing when you're talking to someone in person. People are less likely to. You're looking at someone in their face. You're not going to say. Most people are not going to say the things that they might have said to me online.
They're not. They just look at you. That's why I say I find it funny. That's why I say, man, I just be laughing about it. It's just be hilarious.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Oh, man.
The big question for me in that timeline is, why didn't we do it sooner? Why did it take so long? Why did we wait until after 12,000 years ago, really after 10,000 years ago, to start seeing the beginnings of civilization?
The following is a conversation with Graham Hancock, a journalist and author who for over 30 years has explored the controversial possibility that there existed a lost civilization during the last ice age, and that it was destroyed in a global cataclysm some 12,000 years ago. He is the presenter of the Netflix documentary series Ancient Apocalypse, the second season of which has just been released, and it's focused on the distant past of the Americas, a topic I recently discussed with the archaeologist Ed Barnhart. Let me say that Ed represents the kind of archaeologist, scholar I love talking to on the podcast. Extremely knowledgeable, humble, open-minded, and respectful in disagreement. I'll do many more podcasts on history, including ancient history. Our distant past is full of mysteries, and I find it truly exciting to explore those mysteries with people both on the inside and the outside of the mainstream in the various disciplines involved. This is a Let's Begin podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Graham Hancock. Let's start with a big foundational idea that you have about human history, that there was an advanced Ice Age civilization that came before and perhaps seeded what people now call the six cradles of civilization: Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, China, Andes, and Mesoamerica. So let's talk about this idea that you have. You're at the highest possible level. Describe it.
It would be better to describe it as a foundational sense of puzzlement and incompleteness in the story that we are taught about our past, which envisages more or less, there have been a few ups and downs, but more or less straightforward evolutionary progress. We start out as hunter-foragers, then we become agriculturalists. The hunter-forager phase could go back hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, this is where it's also important to mention that anatomically modern humans were not the only humans. We had Neanderthals from, 400,000 years ago to about 40,000 years ago. They were certainly human because anatomically modern humans interbred with them, and we carry Neanderthal genes. There were the Denisovans, maybe 300,000 to perhaps even as recently as 30,000 years ago. And again, interbreeding took place. They're obviously a human species. So, we've got this background of humans who didn't look quite like us. And then we have anatomically modern humans. And I think the earliest anatomically modern human skeletal remains are from Jebel Hood in Morocco and date to about 310,000 years ago. So the question is, what were our ancestors doing after that? And I think we can include the Neanderthals and the Denisovans in that general picture. And why did it take so long? This is one of the puzzles, one of the questions that bother me. Why did it take so long when we have creatures who are physically identical to us? We cannot actually weigh and measure their brains, but from the work that's been done on the crania, it looks like they have the same brains that we do, with the same wiring. So if we've been around for 300,000 plus years at least, and if ultimately in our future was the process to create civilization or civilizations, why didn't it happen sooner? Why did it take so long? Why was it such a long time? Even the story of anatomically modern humans has kept on changing. I remember a time when it was said that there hadn't been anatomically modern humans before 50,000 years ago. And then it became 196,000 years ago with the findings in Ethiopia, and then 310,000 years ago. There's a lot of missing pieces in the puzzle there. But the big question for me in that timeline is, why didn't we do it sooner? Why did it take so long? Why did we wait until after 12,000 years ago, really after 10,000 years ago, to start seeing the beginnings, what are selected as the beginnings of civilization in places like Turkey, for example? And then there's a relatively slow process of adopting agriculture, and by 6,000 years ago, we see ancient Sumer emerging as a
Come
civilization.
on, man.
And we're then in the pre-dynastic period in ancient Egypt as well, 6,000 years ago, beginning to see definite signs of what will become the dynastic civilization of Egypt about 5,000 years ago. And interestingly, round about the same time, you have the Indus Valley civilization popping up out of nowhere. And by the way, the Indus Valley civilization was a lost civilization until the 1920s, when railway workers accidentally stumbled across some ruins. I've been to Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, and these are extraordinarily beautifully centrally planned cities. Clearly they're the work of an already sophisticated civilization. One of the things that strikes me about the Indus Valley civilization is that we find a steatite seal of an individual seated in a recognizable yoga posture. And that seal is 5,000 years old. And the yoga posture is Mula Bandhasana, which involves a real contortion of the ankles and twisting the feet back. It's an advanced yoga posture. So there it is 5,000 years ago. And that then raises the question, well, how long did yoga take to get to that place when it was already so advanced 5,000 years ago? What's the background to this? China, the Yellow River civilization. Again, it's around about the same period, 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. You get these first signs of something happening. So it's very odd that all around the world we have this sudden upsurge of civilization about 6,000 years ago, preceded by what seems like a natural evolutionary process that would lead to a civilization, and yet certain ideas being carried down and manifested and expressed in many of these different civilizations. I just find that whole idea very puzzling and very disturbing, especially when I look at this radical break that takes place in not just the human story, but the story of all life on Earth, which was the last great cataclysm that the Earth went through, which was the Younger Dryas event. It was an extinction level event. That's when all the great megafauna of the Ice Age went extinct. It's after that, it's after that event that we start seeing this, what are taken to be the beginnings of the first gradual steps towards civilization. We come out of the Upper Paleolithic as it's defined, the old end of the Old Stone Age, and into the Neolithic. And that's when the wheels are supposedly set in motion to start civilization rolling. But what happened before that, and why did that suddenly happen there? And I can't help feeling, and I've felt this for a very long while, that there are major missing pieces in our story. It's often said that I'm claiming to have proved that there was an advanced lost civilization in the Ice Age, and I am not claiming to have proved that. That is a hypothesis that I am putting forward to answer some of the questions that I have about prehistory. I think it's worthwhile to inquire into those possibilities, because the Younger Dryas event was a massive global cataclysm, whatever caused it, and it's strange that just after it we start seeing these first signs.
Come on, man.
So the current understanding in mainstream archaeology is that after the Younger Dryas is when the civilizations popped up in different places of the globe. With a lot of similarities, but they popped up independently.
Yeah, independently and by coincidence. And by coincidence, those big civilizations that we all remember as the first civilizations, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley civilization, China, they all pop up at pretty much the same time. That is the mainstream view.
And they don't just pop up; they kind of build up gradually. First, there's some settlements.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And then there's different dynamics of how they build up, and the role of agriculture in that is also non-obvious. But it's just there's first a kind of settlement, a stabilization of where the people are living. Then they start using agriculture. Then they start getting urban centers and that kind of stuff.
It seems like an entirely reasonable argument. Everything about that makes sense. There is no doubt that you're seeing evolutionary progress, social evolution taking place in those thousands of years before Sumer emerges. But what's happening now, really, I spent much of the 90s and the late 1980s investigating this issue of a lost civilization. I wrote a series of books about it. But by 2002, when I published a book called Underworld, which was the most massive and most heavy book that I've ever written, because I was writing very defensively at the time. By the time I finished that book, my wife Santa and I spent 7 years scuba diving all around the world, looking for structures underwater, often led by local fishermen or local divers, to anomalies that they'd seen underwater. By the time that book was finished, I thought, actually, I've done this story. I've walked the walk. I really don't have much more to say about it. And I turned in another direction, and I wrote a book called Supernatural: Meetings with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind, recently retitled Visionary, and that was about the role of, fundamentally, about the role of psychedelics in the evolution of human culture. And I didn't think that I would go back to the lost civilization issue. But Göbekli Tepe in Turkey kept on forcing itself upon me. The more and more discoveries.
Probably gonna do a weightlifting stream. Probably gonna stop stream and do a weightlifting stream instead.
The two largest megalithic pillars. And I reached a point where I realized I have to get back in. I have to get back in the water.
This is a good warm up.
To investigate this again. And
It's good de-rusting.
A game changer, but I think it's a game changer for everything, because Göbekli Tepe, the extraordinary nature of it, we're looking at a major megalithic site which is at least 5,500 years older than, say, Gigantia in Malta, which was previously considered to be the oldest megalithic site in the world. And this led, of course, to a huge amount of interest and attention, both from the Turkish government, who see the tourism potential of having the world's oldest megalithic site, and from archaeologists. And this, in turn, has led to exploration and excavation.
Okay, at least we can take a 5-minute break. At least I might turn off stream too. Let's see. Thanks.
And going down into Syria and further down into the Jordan Valley as far as Jericho, and even across a bit of the Mediterranean into Cyprus, is what Turkish archaeologists are now calling the Tas Tepeler civilization. They're calling it a civilization, the Stone Hills civilization, with very definite identifying characteristics: semi-subterranean circular structures, the use of T-shaped megalithic pillars, sometimes not anywhere near as big as those at Göbekli Tepe. It's clear that Göbekli Tepe now was not the beginning of this process. It was actually, in a way, the end of this process. It was the summation of everything that Stone Hills civilization had achieved. But what is becoming clear is that this is a period before the foundation of Göbekli Tepe. As far as we know, that date of 11,600 years ago is the oldest date for Göbekli Tepe. But of course, there's a lot of Göbekli Tepe still underground, so we can't say for sure that that's the oldest, but it's the oldest so far excavated. What we're seeing is that in that whole region around there something was in motion, and it began to go into motion round about the beginning of the Younger Dryas, and this is where these two dates are really important. The Younger Dryas, I'll round the figures off, begins around 12,800 years ago, and it ends around 11,600 years ago. So Göbekli Tepe's construction date, if it is 11,600 years ago, if they don't find older materials, marks the end of the Younger Dryas. But the beginning of the Younger Dryas, we're already seeing the stirrings of the kind of culture that manifests in full form at Göbekli Tepe. And after the construction of Göbekli Tepe, in fact, even during the construction of Göbekli Tepe, we see agriculture beginning to be adopted. The people who created Göbekli Tepe were all hunter-foragers at the beginning. But by the time Göbekli Tepe was finished, and it was definitely, deliberately finished, closed off, closed down, deliberately buried, covered with earth, covered with rubble, and then topped off with a hill, which is why Göbekli Tepe is called what it is. Göbekli Tepe means pot-bellied hill, or the hill of the navel. For a long time, Göbekli Tepe was thought to be just a hill that looked a bit like a pot-belly.
Can you say how it was discovered? I think this is one of the most fascinating things on Earth, period. So maybe can you say what it is and how it was discovered?
Well, Göbekli Tepe is, first of all, the oldest fully elaborated megalithic site that we know of anywhere in the world. It doesn't mean that older ones won't be found, but it is the oldest so far found. the part of the site that's been excavated, which is a tiny percentage of the whole site, we do know. My first visit to Göbekli Tepe was in 2013, and Dr. Klaus Schmidt, the late Dr. Klaus Schmidt, who died a year later, was very generous to me and showed me around the site for over a period of 3 days. And he explained to me that they've already used ground-penetrating radar on the site, and they know that there's much more Göbekli Tepe still underground. So anything is possible in terms of the dating of Göbekli Tepe. But what we have at the moment is a series of almost circular, but not quite circular enclosures, which are walled with relatively small stones, and then inside them you have pairs of megalithic pillars. And the archetypal part of that site is enclosure D, which contains the 2 largest upright megaliths, about 18 feet tall and reckoned to weigh somewhere in the range of 20 tons, if I have my memory correct. They're substantial, hefty pieces of stone. It isn't some kind of extraordinary feat to create a 20-foot tall or 20-ton megalith, nor is it an extraordinary feat to move it. There's nothing magical or really weird about that. Human beings can do that and always have. Besides, the quarry for the megaliths is right there. It's within 200 meters of the main enclosure. So that's not a mystery. But the mystery is why suddenly this new form of architecture, this massive megalithic pillars appear. And the pillars, one of the things that interests me about the pillars is their alignment, and there is good work that's been done which suggests that enclosure D aligns to the rising of the star Sirius, and the rising points of the star Sirius appear to be mapped by the other enclosures, which are all oriented in slightly different directions. It was the work entirely of hunter-foragers, but by the time Göbekli Tepe was completed, agriculture was being introduced and was taking place there. Now, you asked how Göbekli Tepe was found. The answer to that is that there was a survey of that pot-bellied hill in the 1960s by some American archaeologists, and they were absolutely looking for Stone Age material, for material from the Paleolithic, and they had found some Paleolithic flints, upper Paleolithic flints around there, so it looked like a good place to look. But then they noticed, sticking out of the side of the hill, some very finely cut stone, bits of very large and very finely cut stone. And looking at that, the workmanship was so good that those archaeologists were confident that it had nothing to do with the Stone Age. And they thought they were looking at perhaps some Byzantine remains. And they abandoned the site and never looked at it further. And it wasn't until the German Archaeological Institute got involved.
I'm gonna sign off now. I gotta do some things, then I'll do weightlifting stream, I think, in a little bit, maybe in half an hour, an hour.
And started to dig at Göbekli Tepe, that they
Something like that. Thank you for being here, though. That was good. That was a good session.
They'd found potentially the oldest megalithic site in the world. And they'd found it at a place where agriculture, according to the established historical timeline, that's where agriculture, at any rate in Europe and Western Asia, begins.
Alright, I think I'm just going to sign off.
In Anatolia, in Turkey, and
Thank you,
gradually
and goodbye.
Westward from there.
And yet the understanding is it was created by hunter-gatherers.
It was created by hunter-gatherers. There was no agriculture 11,600 years ago